conference will now be recorded.
Good. Good evening, everybody. If you'll bear with us 1 second, we do have a quick, I know it's not quite 7 o'clock, we do have another quick meeting that we noticed for 6:50. It is a CDRA meeting. So what you'll see right now is we have another brief meeting right now that'll hopefully only take a few minutes, and then we'll move in. You'll see us close out that meeting, and then we'll open up the general meeting. So if you'll bear with us, this is a separate meeting right now. So at this point, we'll open the CDRA meeting. Look for the approval of minutes.
I make a motion to have the minutes of the July 12, 2023 be prepared and distributed to each member of the Redevelopment Agency Board. The board will have 10 days to review the minutes and submit any changes to the secretary. If after 10 days there are no changes, the minutes will stand approved. If there are changes, the process will be followed until all changes are made and the board is in agreement.
Second.
Motion by Sherry, second by Jared. All in favor?
Aye.
And all we have is, wow, it's just a consent agenda. So look for approval of the consent agenda.
Motion to approve the consent agenda as written.
Second.
Motion by Jared, second by Steve. Jared?
Yes.
Teddy?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. That motion carries. Okay, we will,
Motion to adjourn CDA meeting.
motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second by Jared. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everybody. Okay, we'll give us just a couple minutes and we will open up the general meeting. Yeah. Before 7 o'clock. Because we noticed before 7 o'clock, so we have to wait.
Very rarely.
Yeah, I've got 7. Yeah, we do. We're good. Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to our city council meeting this evening for July 12th, 2023. We will start with a Pledge of Allegiance tonight by Antonio Valbuena.
I pledge allegiance
Okay, we'll move on to item 4.2, City Council comments and recognitions. I think tonight we'll start with Jake. Should we do that? So I know we've got a few different groups here tonight. For those that don't know, we still conduct DARE in our schools. In every school, every elementary school in 5th grade, the students go through the DARE program. And in every class, there's an essay winner chosen everybody can submit an essay, and the winners are chosen from each class. And I know Jake helps pick those. Do you pick them alone, Jake? Or does Chief pick them? Okay. Okay. But so, and this is the first year we've decided to recognize and bring them here. They're recognized in front of their peers, in front of their classes. But we thought it'd be fun to bring them here to a council meeting and recognize them for their efforts as well. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Officer Jake and let him kind of speak to these essay winners.
Thank you. Mayor, you stole some of my thunder already. So, Mayor, City Manager, council members, and others, it's a packed house today. Thank you for letting us come in here tonight. As you know, as the mayor already said, there's a program that Harriman City is proud to present to the kids. It's a great program that has changed since you and I went through that as students. It's a 10-week program that I get to go talk to the kids. And it's more than just about drugs anymore. It's about good life lessons. It's about communication. It's about stress. It's about risks and consequences, making good choices. And the base of it is about making good choices and how to make a good choice, which obviously in the police department, we see when people don't make good choices. And I see a lot of these kids who are making great choices every day. As a Harriman resident and as a police officer, after getting to know these kids over the last year, I'm pretty confident that our city is set really well for the next generation to come. And it's a privilege to get to interact with these kids. It's a group of really good kids. As the mayor said, we read through, so part of the the DARE program is that they have to write an essay in order to graduate. Now, I read about 1,000 essays this year. There's a lot of really good writers in our city. And some of them were really hard. Some of them I did give to some of my coworkers and say, hey, I'm not sure between these 2 or 3, help me decide. But I do want to introduce, if I can read off their names. So we pick one of, every class had an essay winner. We had 33 classes, 5th grade classes, that we taught at. There's a lot of other charters and private schools in Harriman that we don't teach at. But between Providence Hall and Jordan School District, me and Officer Rice have taught 33 classes. So that's 330 lessons that we taught. So, and maybe, guys, as I read your names, if it's okay if they come down here? Sure, yes. So be listening, and I'm sorry if I butcher your names. It's been kind of a long day. But in Oakleaf Elementary, which is our newest elementary, we have Adeline Brown, Kinsey Turner, and Ellie Goldman. At Ridgeview Elementary, we have Haley Jones, Nadia Lilo, Ryder Dahl, Juan Prince Irwin, and Ellie Nye. At Silvercrest, we have Madison Brady, Sydney Reynolds, Chantel Burton, John Butler, and Lillian Spencer. At Butterfield Canyon Elementary, it's starting to feel better, I'm not all alone. Butterfield Canyon, we have Kellen Bowden, Elizabeth Danzy, Brody Marshall, and Jalen Shore. At Bastion Elementary, we have Harper, if you're here, I'm sorry, Staylock, I think. Caitlin Hoskins, Joseph Messina, and Hope Carper. Harriman Elementary, we have Clara Young, Finley Pearson Terry, Nora Gross, Mateo Martins, and Jaden De La Cruz. Blackridge Elementary, we have Jack Hayward, Harley Conradi, Violet Blair, McKay Evans, Matthew Moran. And then at Providence, we have Amelia Johnson and Harper Lloyd. And if I could just put a caveat with Violet Blair, she beat out her twin brother by a hair, I think, but she won. Anyway, council, these are a good representation, I think, of some of the best kids we have in Harriman City. If we can give them maybe a round of applause. If we can take a picture. Can we come up here?
Yeah.
That'd be awesome.
We'll put you right here. Jake, we'll put you right there. Yeah.
Parents, you can come up and take pictures if you'd like. Pack 'em in.
Congratulations to all of you, and thank you, Jake, for your, and Officer Rice, again, for your efforts with our schools and with our students. I will say at this point, we do not get offended if you want to leave at this point. It goes downhill from here quickly, so. So feel free, we're not going to be offended if at this point you need to take a few minutes and leave, you're fine. I mean, you're welcome to stay, we welcome audiences, but you are welcome to leave, so. Look for any other comments or recognitions at this point? I will say it's been since June, early June, that we met. Huge shout out to our staff, everybody. Not only our staff this year, but all those outside groups that helped put on an amazing Town Days, a week of Town Days. Just what a week. I love the week. I love that it's a few days, and the others that participate, Friends of Harriman, Harriman Baseball. Who else are some of the other partners that?
We had a lot of great volunteers. The Youth Council was a big
Youth
help,
Council, of
like
course,
they always
yes,
are.
yes.
Our Good for Life Market partners.
That's right.
Our Entrepreneurs Market partners. Just all hands on deck. So it's
UFA,
great.
our Harriman PD, a lot of extra hours. Our crossing guards this year that
Crossing guards.
really stepped in and did a
HPD,
lot. Yep.
UFA. I mean, it was all our businesses that showed up at local stroll. It was
It was
fantastic.
amazing.
So
It was a good week. So thank you to everybody involved in that.
Just one comment that if everyone hasn't heard by now, we are going to be holding a truth and taxation hearing on August 22nd to discuss a potential tax increase for the Harriman City Safety Enforcement area that funds our police department. And we know there's a lot of sensitivities around that and a lot of divergent opinions. But as a council, we are truly soliciting and asking for the public's input and help in making this decision. I wish we could have meetings like this every time we meet, but usually it's crickets in here. So we hope that when that meeting comes around, that there will, if you can't come to make your voice heard, send emails to council, reach out to the recorder, make sure that you have a chance to participate and let us know what your feelings and thoughts are.
Can I just tag on real fast? And please understand that comments on social media are not official comments. So please make sure that you either come here or you send an official notification through the process through the city so we can accurately look at your concerns and your comments and make them part of the public record so we can utilize them to make good decisions.
Yes, Harriman Happenings is not
Well,
a city Facebook page.
or even the city's
Yeah.
Facebook page, your comments on those page don't come to us. It's not public record. Those avenues, social media, et cetera, are used as ways to push information out. And then please contact any of us to make comments. While I try to look at some of those things, it's not an official record. It's not, I don't know what the word is. It's not official. It doesn't come to us. There's a good chance many of us won't see it.
And I will say property taxes are the most confusing thing I've ever dealt with in my entire life. This is truly the first time ever that Harriman City has held a truth in taxation actual hearing to consider an increase. We know taxes have gone up, and that's why it's complicated. But this is the first time that Harriman City has contemplated that. So please, I would say, we encourage you to come to that meeting, but as Jared said, please reach out to us beforehand. We can answer a lot of your questions, deal with a lot of concerns before possibly that meeting. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about how property taxes work, but please reach out to us.
No decisions have been made.
Yeah, no decisions have been made. If you'll watch our meetings,
Listen to any of our work meetings.
we're still going back and forth on a lot of different things. So we had a deadline of when we had to put that out there, and we were still making some decisions. So that's why it's at where it's at right now. So please reach out to us. It hurts us as much as, I mean, it's not, every decision that affects you guys affects us, our homes as well. So these things are not easy. Not one of the reasons I signed up for this, I'll say that. So, okay, we'll move on to public comment at this point. Audience members may bring any item to the city council's attention. Comments will be limited to 2 minutes. State law prohibits the council from acting on items that do not appear on the agenda. Public comments for this meeting will also be conducted electronically. Any person interested in addressing the council may submit a comment by emailing recorder@harriman.org or by visiting harriman.org/agendas and minutes, where there is a link to fill out an online public comment form. Your statement will be incorporated into the record. So I have not seen any forms tonight. Do you have any forms? Are there anybody here to speak? Public comment. Okay, Chad?
Hi, my name's Chad Danzy. I live at 7005 West Harriman Highway. Today I'd like to discuss the rights of man. These fundamental rights are discussed in the preamble of the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. From these rights come all other individual rights found in the Constitution of the United States of America, including liberty, property, freedom of press, and speech, religion, equal treatment before the law. America's founders clearly understood that private property is the foundation not only of prosperity but of freedom itself. Thus, through common law, state law, and the Constitution, they protected property rights, the rights of people to acquire, use, and dispose of property freely. George Washington once said, "Freedom and property rights are inseparable. You cannot have one without the other." James Madison, the principal author of the Constitution, also echoed these thoughts when he wrote, "As a man is said to have a right to his property, he may also equally said to have property in his rights." They understood that the property rights are fundamental to a stable society, to the independence of a nation, and to the freedom of mankind. Every day, all around the great nation, Americans go to work to acquire property so they can be independent. They work in factories, hospitals, schools, farms to obtain the American dream, a key principle to our freedoms and the greatness of our nation. The American dream is the belief that anyone, regardless of where they are born or what class they are born into, can attain their own version of success in a society in which upward mobility is possible for everyone. Personal success is achieved through sacrifice, risk-taking, and hard work rather than by chance. Achieving the American dream requires political and economic freedom, as well as the rules of law and private property rights. Without them, individuals cannot make choices that will permit them to attain success, nor can they have confidence in their achievements, that their achievements will not be taken away from them through arbitrary force. Property rights are protected by the Constitution under the 5th and 14th Amendments, which states no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without compensation. Even in cases for public good, property rights must be held sacred as intended by our founding fathers. Eminent domain of property places not only one individual's rights at risk, but also our community's confidence at risk when the city takes away an individual's achievement away from through arbitrary force. Although it is
Chad, I
possible
need you to wrap it up, please.
for a city to acquire property through eminent domain, it is not just and will erode the community's confidence in the governance of Harriman City. As noted in the Bill of Rights, governments are
Chad, I need you
instituted
to,
among
Chad,
men.
your 2 minutes is up. I need you to sit
I'll
down,
be right
please.
there. I'm
Chad.
almost done. Your Honor, I'd like to just finish. I've got 2 sentences, please. As you proceed through your eminent domain hearing today, please be aware of your governance. Is it just? Is your decision appropriate? Or are you eroding the public trust and confidence in the American dream by violating someone's property rights through your decision? Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Chad.
You can move that mic
Yeah,
down.
pull that mic. Thank you, Antonio.
Hi, I am Brimley, and this is Kenzie, and we are Girl Scouts from Troop 367, and we come to talk to you about our bronze project. We choose to make retired flag boxes. These boxes are for our community to donate their flags to our troop, and we will come with the VFW Post 12087, and we will properly retire them. We would like to read you a letter to you.
Dear Harriman City, we are juniors of Girl Scout Troop 367. We are working towards our Bronze Award. To better serve your community, we are building flag retirement boxes to be placed at the City Hall. We are asking for your permission to place the box at the City Hall. We welcome the community to utilize the boxes for old tattered flags that need to be retired. We will come by every other month with a veteran to collect all of the flags. We ensure that they will be properly retired. Thank you for your consideration. We look forward to hearing from you soon. Best regards, Girl Scout Troop 367.
Thank you. I know I want to clap too. I love it.
Good job, you guys.
I love it.
Mayor
Good
will
job,
take care
girls.
of it.
They will. We will set that up, so I think we're all on board. So get with Wendy. I'm going to point you towards Wendy. Get with Wendy, and we'll get everything set up. So we love it. Thank you for all you do for our community, too. I know your troop's been involved in a lot. And she's my Girl Scout cookie supplier, so
Just,
my dealer.
Mayor, just through conversations with them, there's certain landfills that collect flags that are improperly disposed of and retired, and so this is one of their avenues to help make the citizens aware of how to properly retire flags of the respect that fabric deserves.
I love it. Love it, love it. Thank you, girls. Good job. Okay, any other public comment at this time? Okay. Seeing none, we will move on to item 6, our city council reports. Jared.
Nope.
Teddy.
We had a sewer board meeting the end of last month. We do have a proposed amendment adjustment that's still open in a public hearing. We are meeting next Tuesday morning is a different date. We usually meet the fourth Tuesday, but due to the holiday, it will be the third Tuesday. So next Tuesday morning, if you have public comment or you want to be part of that public hearing, it's just a budget amendment. We are not increasing the proposed tax rate of the South Valley Sewer District or making any changes to that actual revenue on that budget, but it's just to adopt the new budget. So that's all my report.
Thank you. Sherry?
I'll just, on the Wasatch Front Waste and Recycling District, make sure you watch your mailboxes because you should be getting postcards from the district for the area cleanup where you can reserve a dumpster. That program is in our city in August. So you have to call into the district and schedule those dumpsters around the 1st of August. So watch for a big pink postcard to come to your mailbox, and know that those dumpsters go pretty fast. So if you really need one and want one, you, and it's asked that you keep open the option of allowing some of your neighbors to put things in there so that we don't have dumpsters that are a quarter of the way full, because there is a demand for them. But there's also a responsibility if it's in your driveway, so there's a catch-22 on those, but just understand that it's encouraged to share if you're not going to be able to fill your dumpster all the way. And then as far as youth council, they're here tonight, so I'll defer to that, to item 8.1 and 8.2, and then Jordan Valley Water Conservancy District. I can tell you the reservoirs filled up this year. We're about 98, 97% full in all of them. And the only reason we're below 100% is because the water year is moving along and they decrease with usage. But it was a good water year. The concern was that if we have a good water year, people would kind of go back to old habits. The data is showing that they're not. People are being conservation minded. We're down about 4% from last month's usage versus last year at that time, and we're down 17% from 2 years prior to that. So people are making good choices with water conservation. Just always please continue to do that. If there's areas in your yard that you only walk on your lawn to mow it, consider if you could repurpose that, or things like that that would use less outdoor water is really where we really need a lot of help. So thank you for all the efforts that are happening and the continued conservation mindedness of water. That being said, speaking of truth and taxation hearings, I'll be addressing the board, the council on 8.3 to talk about Jordan Valley's tax increase. There will be a tax increase there and a hearing for that on, sorry, I don't want to tell you the wrong name, August 9th. It's not August 22nd, that's ours, August 9th. So. And I'll discuss that in a few minutes.
Steve?
Who wants to talk about mosquitoes?
No.
Have some this year.
Yeah. So I don't want to be a doomsayer, but mosquitoes are coming. I represent the city on the South Salt Lake Valley Mosquito Abatement District Board. And a lot of the time it's pretty boring meetings, pretty routine, not a lot going on. This year is a different kind of conversation. Typically this year, they set out traps all over the place to kind of see what kind of mosquitoes we're getting, how many are out there, that kind of a thing. And normally through 1st of July, we would see average of about 8,000 or 9,000 mosquitoes in the traps. So far this year, we're at 38,000 mosquitoes in the traps. So just a little bit more than we've had in years past. And luckily, so far this year, we have not had any cases of West Nile virus reported. However, that usually peaks starting this weekend through the end of July. So as a reminder, if you are going out and about anywhere, especially in the evenings or out in the woods, please use EPA certified insect repellent. There's 3 different chemicals that they use, DEET, can't remember what the other one is, and then there's an oil that is also certified by the EPA that can be used. But please use those for yourself, for your family, skin and clothing. Make sure you're protected from disease-carrying mosquitoes. I just also wanted to put on record, Mr. Mayor, if you could just, for public consumption, explain something you didn't know about the mosquito district.
Oh, geez, thank you. So we were having a wedding in my backyard, and I was getting ready for it, and I literally had 30 bites on my legs in my backyard. So I reached out to Steve joking, like, can I call the abatement people and have them come spray my backyard? I didn't want special treatment, but I wanted to know if that was a possibility, right? So I called them up, and there's a form to fill out, actually. I filled out a form, and actually, this is probably where you'll be disappointed. They called me and said, it's too late in the year, they can't do anything. They're already flying. Right. That's bad. Good luck. So that's what they said to me. But early in the year, if you know there's standing water on your property or anywhere near your property, they do take time to come out and spray before they fly, I guess is the key. I didn't realize that was
the larval stage. That's the easiest time to get them. If you have any standing water, any buckets, any old pails, dog bowl dishes, pools, kiddie pools, any stuff like that that's open, empty those out. Don't let the mosquitoes in there because they will breed, and they will breed pretty quickly in there.
Decorative ponds, water
Yeah,
features.
all of that stuff. Yeah, anything you can do to try and not let them have a place to go. But
The fish work, by the way.
yeah,
I have a pond. Some guys been to my house.
You got-
see
you
it.
got mosquito
It
fish?
It supports 12 to 13 goldfish who make it through the winter. I have 0 bugs. I don't feed them. They eat the larvae in there and algae and stuff, and it works.
yeah, that's awesome. But
You're not doing adulticide?
they are doing some adulticide, but they are really concentrating in the marsh areas. So it's along the Jordan River and some areas like that where they're really trying to keep
Not
the
in
adult
the mayor's
populations down as much as they can. They also were testing out a new technology that had amazing and surprising results. They were so good, in fact, that they are questioning the data. They want to go back and recheck everything 2 and 3 times just to make sure, because they got results that was really unprecedented. They were able to get 80% of mosquitoes out to a half a mile away in partially covered areas. So they could be in a covered thing and it still got in there. And it's, I mean, all the things that they use for adulticide are deemed safe by the EPA, but this is even another level of safety. So if it continues to work, they'll be using that going forward. It's less expensive and more effective, so it's a double win. Anyway, a lot of conversation about mosquitoes. Just watch out, they're coming.
Well, they're here. They're here.
These are the early arrivers. Wait till the army shows up. Yeah.
Better than those grasshoppers they thought were coming. Okay, briefly, since it's been a month, we had a Council of Mayors meeting back in Murray, 15th of June, still mainly talking about homelessness. They still are looking for a replacement shelter, a overflow shelter. Mill Creek took it on last year. They've got to find a different location this year, and there's been no property submitted. I mean, it's just, there's nowhere to put it, so they're struggling to meet. We have to, as a state, as a county, we have to select a location, and we haven't been able to submit a location right now. So we're keeping an eye on that. I will comment that afternoon on, we didn't get enough, I don't think we talked enough about this even as a council. On that evening, on the 15th, our council hosted the first ever, we called it the Southwest Salt Lake and North Utah County Summit. And this was geared towards dealing with the fastest growing areas in, I think probably in the state, are Southwest Salt Lake County and Northern Utah County. When we go into these meetings, we tend to have these boundaries where we stop at Salt Lake County and Utah County stops at their border, and we don't really talk to each other about what plans are as far as freeways or future road access. So we decided to host this meeting and we ended up with some major players that came to City Hall during rush hour traffic to really, as a council, we kind of felt like that a lot of our state leaders, a lot of the agencies that are our partners didn't understand the growth that's happening out here. I think that's really what the focus was. And so we held this meeting to emphasize the growth that is coming out here, that has come, because to emphasize as a council, we are very focused on infrastructure. We know the growth is here already, it's happening, and infrastructure is the key. So this was really a great step to say, this was the first of many meetings to say, how can we work together to push and lobby our state, the state legislature and others for funding out here for, maybe it's ramping up Mountain View Corridor quicker, maybe it's more east-west connections, things we're all worried about. Is it a TRAX line that extends through? Is it some bus routes, right? And coincidentally now for the first time we've seen it, there's a proposed bus line on the horizon, possibly for Harriman, that would leave the Daybreak Track Station, travel down through, I think right in front of City Hall, if I'm not mistaken, go out to 134th, out to Sentinel Ridge, down Sentinel Ridge to the new Slick U of U campus, and then kind of make a loop back around. So that's now our tentatively proposed route by UTA, so now it's on us to keep pushing at least that route to help alleviate possible congestion or whatever. And then there's a lot more push with some other possible projects coming this way. So I think it was fantastic, and it's going to, a discussion. Lehigh is going to host the next one in August. Again, so this will be a continued discussion, and then hoping to meet again with the league convention in September. Again, so we're hoping for 3 meetings this quarter, so. That's my report. We'll move on to item 8. 8.1 specifically, we will do the Youth Council Oath of Office ceremony at this point. So we'll turn it to Destiny, who does an amazing job, by the way. I'm sorry, Destiny, I'm going to embarrass you for a minute. Destiny not only runs our youth council, but she also heads the state committee as far as youth councils. That Destiny is just an absolute treasure to have in our community. Really, she does amazing work with our youth. And you're going to 49 this year. Looks like 50 this year, which is a record number of youth council. And I say this every time: we could not do our events without our youth council. We could not do what we do as a city and a community without our youth council. So, and to all the youth, thank you. We'll talk about, but Destiny, to you, thank you for what you do. It's just, you're amazing, and we appreciate you. So.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm excited to be here tonight to introduce you to the new members. Like the mayor said, we have 50 youth council this year, 50. I don't know if I'm being punished or rewarded. Just kidding. I'm excited to get to work with all of the amazing youth that we have in Harriman, and I'm kind of glad that Jake went first because I get to see some of the youth that are coming up. So hopefully they'll come on to youth council as they get a little bit older. We will be holding a summer kickoff retreat this year on August 25th, and we would like to invite City Council to come out and have dinner with the Youth Council and get to know them better. So look for more information on that as the date gets closer. With that, I will introduce the Youth Council, and I'll call them up one by one. And then as I call you guys, if you guys want to come up, get your paper, and then just line up here, and then Jackie will do the oath of office. Okay? So we'll start with Adeline Gilham. I think I saw her. And I'm sorry if I ruin names. Alyssa Sokol. Austin Taylor. Belen Ashinti. Did I say that correct? Let's see, Benjamin Danzy. Brandon Moreno. Cade Swint. Cassidy So. Chloe Stump. Kyla Stump. I'm assuming she's not here either. Emma Edgel. Ezekiel Butterfield. Gabby Apodaca. Gabriel Jimenez. Hayden O'Fiken. Hannah Park. Jazzery Van Roosendaal. Joshua Didenhover. Kaylee Farnsworth. Kaylee Gilham. Kennedy Haymond. Kiara Sunhill Singh. Lauren Pelch. Liam O'Fikens. Lily Smith. I saw her. Lucy Yoko. Malia Height. And Munu, I'm not even going to try and say your last name, so you can say it for us. I would have, yeah. Nathan Sow. Nathan Wardle. Naya. Yours is another one I'm not sure how to say. Propitzer. Olivia Weber. I saw her. Sadie Miles. Savannah Taylor. Sophia Jimenez. Spencer Pelch. Summer Ann Gunderson. Sunny Sokol. Tanner Fountain. Tyson Russell. Tyson Southam. Tyson Vickery. Apparently the Tysons didn't want to show up tonight. Urban Smith. Whitney Robinson. And Zaidi Rojas. And then there were a few more that I knew weren't going to be here, which are Adam Wardle, Caden Lee, Cora Anderson, Elijah Hall, and Natalie Southam. So with that, we'll have Jackie do the oath of office.
All the moms are taking photos.
Raise your right hand and repeat. I state your name. Do solemnly swear. That I will support, obey, and defend. The Constitution of the United States. And the Constitution of the State of Utah. And that I will discharge the duties. Of my office. With fidelity. Congratulations.
Okay, now I'm going to have you guys come close, and Mayor and Council, if you guys want to come down for a picture.
Should we stand up here? Should we just stand up here?
Yeah, that would work.
Or Steve said?
Steve said it.
Oh, it's a little crowded down there.
Does that work?
Yeah, no, that'll work perfect.
Go stand by Steve.
Yeah. So if you guys just want to make sure that you go between shoulders. Naya, do you want to come up in front of Summer? Right, yep, right there, perfect. All right, ready? Everyone right here.
You guys got bunny ears now.
Sorry, I was going to sneak to the side really quick.
Trick places.
There so parents can get pictures.
That's awesome.
I want to eat those crackers. Just great. So fancy. That's my question. Yeah, like cracker dust.
Oh, well, that's new. Okay, Youth Council, a few of you taught me how to use Be Real at the convention in Logan. So if you're my connection on Be Real, I expect a post right now. Okay, thank you, everybody. Look forward to working with you all on the Youth Council this upcoming year. It's, I would say if you see us, if you see any of us on council at the events, come up to us, say hi to us. We want to get to know you, work with you, so please, there's 50 of you, so we'll do our best to try to get to know all of you, but please come up, talk to us. We want to get to know you and work with you. So look forward to working with you.
Mayor, just a quick comment. I see some of you guys out in public, and I'm pretty recognizable, and sometimes you guys say hi, and I'm like, where do I know you from? But I saw you at the events and helping out in the T-shirts, and it's fun to see you guys out there. So the more you're involved, the more we'll get to know you, and the more you participate, I mean, the better experience you'll have. So keep it up. I'm super stoked, so.
Okay.
Some of you already babysat my kids, so I think I know who you are.
That's funny. Okay, we'll move on to item 8.2, Youth Council Legacy Reports. You gonna?
So with Youth Council, they have a legacy report that they have to do each year. And we have a couple that would like to, well, a few that would like to report those to you. So we're going to let Alyssa go first.
I don't even need to move the mic. Hi, everyone. So for our legacy project this year, we decided to do a podcast for the youth in Harriman, just brainstorming our ideas. The main goal of this project was just to make information about our community and city easier to access for youth in our city. Some of our topics were it was really fun to research these topics because we got to ask around, ask our friends, think about things in our city that like maybe youth should know that we don't know a lot about. So researching the topics, some of my favorite ones that we did was neurodiversity, what to do when you see our special needs friends around town. We also learned some things about traffic rules, which I think is super important for youth, especially in Harriman, to learn more about. We also did some great episodes on mental health, and Addie's going to tell you more about our process.
So what we did was we wrote a Google Doc about all of the people we wanted to interview and then the questions that we wanted to ask them. And then we reached out to those people and asked if they would be willing to set up a time for us to interview them. And we sent them a copy of our questions, and then we went and interviewed them. And most of our interviews went really well. Well, actually, all of them did. But it was really cool to get to know different people who were working in the city and just around our school and people we know. It was cool to see how they use their knowledge to help others.
While we were doing this project, I learned a lot about our city and other things that go on in it, and it was really cool to learn about that and just to learn more about my city.
All right, so looking ahead, I think we're planning to do this project again next year and just do different episodes about different topics. I think that the more topics we can cover, we can just understand more about our city and things around our city. And yeah.
So where do we find said podcast? Is it available yet?
It's going to be posted on the city's website.
Love it.
Coming soon.
Coming soon. Okay, I love it, girl. Thank you.
Nathan's group, do you want to go next?
Good evening. Where's the on? Oh, I see. Awesome. Okay. Good evening. Hey, I'm Nathan Cassidy Munu. All right, so the beginning, for our legacy project, we wanted to make something that allowed people to enjoy public spaces better, such as parks and trails. And, after thinking about it for a while, we came to the conclusion that we wanted to make a wooden bench to place on Harriman City trails.
For our planning, we had to decide what type of bench we wanted to build based on the difficulty and cost, and eventually we decided on this bench that cost $20.
We went to Home Depot and gathered all the materials, but it was a bit confusing, but we were able to get it all done while finding a way to reduce the amount spent.
And so construction, like, it included lots of steps like gluing, drilling, sanding, and waiting for the glue to dry, which takes longer than you might think. But, we were able to do it.
For the installation, this is what the bench ended up looking like in the end. And we were able to install it in Eric's Trail. And doing so involved coordinating with Joseph Zimmerman, the Trails and Open Space Coordinator.
Although it was a simple bench, we had trouble with weak screws, the glue, and the drilling machine. All this lengthened the time spent on making the bench. However, we were able to figure out what to do, and we successfully finished the bench.
Yeah, so overall, this is a picture of it on Eric's Trail. And so overall, we learned several things. Woodworking's hard. I mean, if you've ever made a bench made out of just wood, it's actually really heavy. And and the second thing we learned is that planning is very important. Through planning, we were able to make the bench more smoothly and get everything done. And we learned the value of hard work and what it can achieve, physical labor. And then finally, we learned that communicating with others and being able to work with others can bring good results. Thank you.
Well done, guys.
Ben and Rebecca, do you want to go next?
You sat on that bench. Awesome.
Do you have our PowerPoint? No. Yes, we did.
So your bench has already been put to work. Councilman Shields has sat on it.
While I do that, should we have Tanner go?
Sure.
Tanner, do you want to come and do yours?
Mine is going to take me about all of 3 seconds to explain, but I just got together with some friends of mine who aren't on the youth council, and one of which did join the youth council this term, and we made bread and delivered it to families in need in my neighborhood.
Fantastic.
Kiara, do you want to do yours?
What kind of bread? Yeah, what kind of bread? A lot of questions we have. And can we get the recipe? White bread? And
No
okay.
butter?
No butter? Did you take some butter with it? Homemade honey butter?
Banana bread, zucchini bread. What are we talking?
Hi, my name is Kiara Sunil Singh, and I wanted to do a legacy project that would benefit the library. I think that the Harriman Library is a great resource, and it's really amazing because all citizens can just go there and get free access to computers and printers and obviously a lot of books. And so I wanted to do something centered around that, so I did a book drive around my community. I went to a couple different neighborhoods, printed out a lot of posters, and then handed them out to people, and then at the end of that, people donated old or used books that they didn't really use anymore, and all of those books were donated to the Harriman Library. Those books would either be put back into the library system if they were in good enough shape, and that it would allow students to get an even larger range of books to use. And the books that weren't good enough to be put back into the library system were sold, and the profit from that was given to the library to create even more resources to maybe buy a new computer or some more new books. And so this really just taught me the importance of planning. It was kind of difficult to go to all the different neighborhoods and figure out which ones I should go to and which ones I shouldn't, but it was a very fulfilling project, and I really did enjoy it. Thank you.
Do you know how many books you were able to collect?
I didn't get the exact number, but maybe around 60 to 70.
That's great, 50 to 70 books. That's great. Good job.
So the Legacy Project is part of the Youth Council Charter. It's something that they're required to do as part of their service. But these guys have to come up with these ideas on their own. It can't be something that they're already kind of participating in, like most of these kids are so involved in different service opportunities that they're involved in things at school and stuff. And the schools have different service projects and things that the kids are involved in, but they can't use that as their legacy project. It has to be something completely and separately from anything else they're doing. And it just always amazes me, just the ideas that they come up with, and just, well, they all always amaze me, period, just with their desire to serve their community. But just big kudos to the parents and the youth who really step up and serve their community and utilize their leadership skills to come up with these different legacy projects that improve our community. And it was sure great today when we said the pledge to hear such a loud Pledge of Allegiance said from all the people here. So thanks for being here and participating.
You're saying part of their requirement should be to attend a certain number of council meetings?
They do have a requirement to attend a certain number of council meetings.
We need an audience.
Maybe we need to increase the requirement. Exactly.
For our legacy project, we chose to do a food drive. Our group for the legacy project was Adam Wardle, Rebecca Danzy, and Ben Danzy. In searching for a legacy project, we decided to find an idea that would not just help our city, but also our county as well. Homelessness and hunger is rising due to an increased cost of food and living expenses. As we discussed possible ideas, the idea of a food drive for the Utah Food Banks came up multiple times. Um, 289,000 Utahns, which equivalent to 1 in 11 individuals, are at risk of missing a meal today. Even more alarming is that 1 in 9 Utah kids are unsure where their next meal is coming from. Last year, the Utah Food Bank decided 67.3 million pounds of food, the equivalent of 56.1 million meals to provide to people facing hunger across the state of Utah.
So as a group, we organized a food drive in Harriman City. We made 120 flyers, which we stapled to plastic bags donated by Smith's Grocery and distributed them in the local community. Households were directed to put donated food in the bags, and we collected this food over the weekend. The following week, we delivered this donated food to the Utah Food Bank to be distributed to hungry families across the state of Utah. So what did we learn? We learned how to organize and lead a service project involving multiple people in our community. We also had fun and felt good about our service and how our project will help those in need. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it. Thank you, everybody. I love that project. That project's timely right now, too, with all the issues we're facing in the county. So thank you, everybody. And thank you for coming.
Great
and
job.
I will, yep, great job to everybody. And I will say, like we did the other group, no obligation to stay. Thank you for coming. You were welcome to stay, but you're
I heard
welcome.
there's extra credit if you stay.
Extra credit. Thank you.
Get 2 cookies.
It's one of those provisions that's really vague in nature. It gives me a lot of flexibility.
Right. Okay, we're going to move on to item 8.3, a report by Councillor Orn of a proposed tax increase by Jordan Valley Water Conservancy District.
Hi, good evening, Mayor and Council. It's always weird to be over here. Tonight, I'm here to represent the Jordan Valley Water Conservancy District. Our responsibility, because you are one of our partners in water, you're one of our member agencies, is anytime that we have a proposed tax increase to come and report to you that there will be a truth in taxation hearing for the district to do a tax increase. Our tax increase this year is about 9.3, not about, it is 9.3%. Our mill levy will go up to, our certified tax rate is 0.00031, and our proposed tax rate increase is 0.000341. We have the ability to go up to 0.0000400, but obviously we try to be responsible stewards and understand every tax increase is a resident's pocket, so we try to minimize that. The problem is with water, we can't say, darn, we'll just have to go on old roads for a while. Water is just a crucial, essential part of life, and so we have to make sure that our infrastructure stays ahead of where it needs to be so that we're not, a project that's a 10-year project gets started when it needs to start so that when it needs to come online, it comes online. So the district does a lot of bonding. So January of 2024, we'll issue another $100 million bond. And so the taxes the property tax allows us to have a good bond rating, so we have lower rates for our bonds so that our infrastructure can be put in place so that we can stay ahead or up, of schedule or up to date with schedule so that when those critical water infrastructure needs are needed, that we already have those in place. So the property tax increase, I don't know what our average home price here is. If we say our average home price in Harriman is about $550,000, then that means the annual property tax increase will be about $8.77 per home. So that will be approximately, if your home's more like $700,000, then your property tax increase will be about $11.17 per year. So our hearing will be on August 9th at 6 p.m. at the district offices. Yep, don't have the address. Anyway, so you can reach out to the district to get the address for that, Jordan Valley Water Conservancy District in Sandy. Do you have any questions for me?
I've got the address right here, Sherry, so we can.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. I've just got.
Usually printed on my paper and it's not.
Hate to put you on the spot.
Put me on the spot, that's why I'm here.
When was the last tax increase and how much was it?
I'm sorry, say that again?
The last tax increase and how much was it, the percentage?
Last year. And I can't remember exactly, probably about 5%. We're usually between 5 and 10%. It might have been closer to 9, but we never, since I've been on the board, we've never been over a 10% increase, but it was definitely last year. And again, it's for bond payments. We're doing it primarily, there's a $700 million project that's getting done at the, sorry, it's not 700, it's a $70 million project at the treatment plant here in Harriman. Just putting in some new technology that's outside. You can see a lot of the plates have been put in. If you were there, you could see them. You can even see them from the roads, but it's to expand our reservoirs, the water treatment, and the cleaning plates that are outside. It's just new technology, but it's good technology that should be very long-lasting technology. So that's been a huge chunk of the bond revenues, of the revenues that we're using from the bonds.
Correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is historically they use the property tax to fund bonds and capital projects, and the water rates, et cetera, or fund the usage, ongoing.
Operations maintenance, yep.
Right.
Yep, that's correct. It's great. And the other thing, too, to remember, there is a study right now. I know one of the senators last year wanted to make it so that we would lose our ability to be a taxing entity and try and just make sure it all is driven by rates. And that kind of got walked back. And so they're just doing a study right now to understand the impact, the implications, because it would all come out in water rates at that point. And it would be pretty staggering, I think, for the public if you took away the taxing part of it and then you dumped it on rates. It would be pretty difficult to roll that out in 1 year. And so we'll see what that study does to see what they do with that taxing. But I'm sure you understand just bond ratings and the ability to have a steady taxable rate makes it so our bond rating is good, and that means our rates are lower, and so it helps keep rates lower for users. And I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't pay the price of water, but there is some public benefit that's not just simply a household turning on their tap. There's public benefit from, and that's why they've been able to use taxes currently and in the past, is because of the public benefit that overall everyone helps pay into that. Any other questions for me?
And the address, I will say, if you're okay with the address.
Sorry, yeah, sorry.
8215 South, 1300 West.
That's it. Thank you. I'll write it on my paper for the next hearing.
Perfect.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. Okay, we'll move on to item 9, our public hearings. First public hearing tonight is a public hearing in consideration of a resolution amending the budgets of the City of Harriman for fiscal year 24. Kyle.
Thank you, Mayor. Just before we start for the public, we did discuss these budget amendments in detail, so I will go over the highlights, but we did have a very thorough discussion prior to this meeting on these amendments. Oh, not on. Okay, first technical issue out of the way. So first, just briefly, I wanted to go over why we would need budget amendments already for the fiscal year 24 budget, since we're only 12 days in to the budget. So just as a brief review, the budget was approved last June. We do a biennial budget here at Harriman, so the 24 budget was approved last year. We've had a few things that have come up since that budget was adopted. First was the state auditor is requiring us to restrict development-related revenue for development-related expenditures. Following best practices, my recommendation as the finance director is we move those to a separate fund outside of the general fund to keep those separate. As you know, the economy was going gangbusters last year. When we approved the budget, things have slowed down a little bit, so we're proposing adjusting our revenue projections to match the slowdown we've seen. Another thing we have discovered is that there are some one-time and restricted revenues that were being treated more as ongoing revenues, which were causing some indirect subsidies for certain departments within the city, so this budget amendment will correct that. And then there's a number of fund and structural changes being proposed. Here is a highlight of some of the adjustments. The first is eliminating some deficits we were projecting due to that slowdown and some subsidies that were in the previous budget. So this does include a number of position eliminations, new positions that had been approved with the 24 budget that we are, as staff, proposing to delay until conditions approve, which includes 6 positions. And then we also have 5 currently vacant positions that we are proposing not to fill. The police department had 3 officers approved for new police officer positions with the budget that we are proposing postponing. With that being said, with the police department budget, the Harriman City Safety Enforcement Area Board has voted to go through the truth and taxation process. These budget amendments are assuming that no tax increase is approved, which is the reason why the 3 officers are being proposed to be eliminated this time. And then also there is a vacant mental health specialist position that is being proposed to be eliminated. Due to some of the slowdowns, we are also, as staff, recommending we defer a 6,000 West Road widening phases 1 and 2. This will reduce our budget for what we're predicting for sales tax for the year. And then there's other adjustments totaling about $179,000. Here is a chart just showing with the amendments, if they are approved, what our general fund revenues look like. General fund is our largest revenue fund within the city, and it's really where everything goes if it doesn't have a specific funding source or needs to be segregated. As you can see, 80% of the general fund's revenue comes from taxes, so that includes property tax, sales tax, energy tax, cable TV tax, and telephone tax. We do get a little bit for charges for services, so billing residents or other people for services we provide, and we do have about $2 million we get from other governmental agencies such as the state. On the expenditure side, as you can see, in the general fund, we spend about 37% of our revenue on personnel, about 27% on operating, about 9% on debt service, 12% on capital outlay, 4% on public safety, and it's important to note this is the public safety portion that the taxing district doesn't fund, so that includes our crossing guards, animal services, community services, and emergency management. And then that admin fee offset is what we charge other departments for services that the general fund provides. Moving into the police department, some of the reasons for the adjustments we had talked about on the prior screen were we had, as staff, an aggressive, in my opinion, an aggressive property tax expectation. We got our tax rates back, and we were over projected on revenue, about $489,000. We had a use of fund balance, and fund balances like the city savings account of $655,000. In addition, fuel prices have consistently remained high, so our operations director had recommended an increase in that. And then, as I had mentioned, we, in this budget amendment, are proposing separating the police department that's funded through the taxing district from public safety that's non-police that's funded through the general fund to keep things separate and clean and transparent. On the police side, this is just a graph showing where the expenditures are located. So as you can see, 81% is spent on personnel, 17% on operating, and then capital is $166,000. Of note, due to the supply chain issues we've seen ordering vehicles, we did move our vehicles we were planning on purchasing in fiscal year 24 to fiscal year 23, so that number is artificially low because we moved up those purchases. And moving on to the non-police, so that includes animal services, community services, and emergency management, 56% on personnel, 31% on operating, and then they do have 2 vehicles planned for purchase this year. As I had mentioned on that first slide, staff are proposing moving development-related revenue and expenditures to a new fund called the Development Services Fund. One thing important that the state auditor is requiring is that any fund balance at the end of the year, so that's any revenue we have in excess of expenditures, has to be restricted for development-related expenses. That's one important thing that this fund will accomplish. And we're also charging an administrative fee for the services we're providing to this fund that aren't directly related to the development process. And here's a chart showing the breakdown of the expenses there. So as you can see, we were charging a admin fee of almost $2 million, personnel is 34%, operating of 11%, and then they have a small capital outlay budget in this fund. So in the water fund, staff is currently working on a water rate study that will most likely come back to the council in the fall for further discussion. There are a few corrections that staff have identified in the adopted budget that we would like to have corrected. So one is salaries and wages weren't budgeted correctly. We have done a full recalculation as staff of the administrative charge that the general fund charges, the water fund, and that did require correction. In addition, best practice is to budget debt service payments. GAAP does allow you to not, but it is not best practice because then the city council isn't authorizing those payments. And then there was a decimal error on a capital project with the original approved budget, so it would be correcting that. Here is a chart showing the expenditures in the water fund. So as you can see, only 11% in the water fund is spent on personnel. The majority of their costs are operating costs of just operating the water system, and then capital outlay. I will note with the capital outlay, 5 million of this 6.6 is bond proceed projects from the bond we issued back in 2021. We are still working on the projects that bond was issued for. Finally, the stormwater fund, we had done a complete recalculation and revisited the fund. We were able to reduce the budget of personnel by doing some recalculations of 71,000. We also looked at the administrative fee that the general fund was charging and was able to reduce that by 322,000. There was also a vehicle purchase that was moved to 23, so we were able to reduce that budget. As you can see in the stormwater fund, it spends about 34% on personnel, and then 66% of their funds are on operating. And with that, are there any questions before the public hearing tonight?
Thank you, Kyle. Okay, at this point, we will open the public hearing on this item. Look for a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Jared, second by Sherry. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, look for a motion to approve.
Motion to approve resolution R33-2023, amending the fiscal year 2024 Harriman City budget.
Second.
Motion by Jared, second by Teddy. Jared?
Yes.
Teddy?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. That motion carries. Thank you, Kyle. Item 9.2, public hearing and consideration of a resolution to approve filing eminent domain action. Bryce.
All right, good evening, Mayor and Council. So as part of the Harriman Main Street project, as you know, there have been some discussions on property acquisition, and for the most part, most of our property acquisitions have gone well and negotiations have been completed for most of the roadway. And so to kind of give a background of the timeline of events to get us kind of to where we are today, I just want to talk about where we came from. So in November of 2022 is when we started identifying right-of-way and parcels that would need to be acquired for the project. We were still finalizing design, but that's kind of when we started to understand the need to acquire property. Then in January, when the design was finalized, we got our bid prices back and knew that we had the budget to do the project. Offers were sent out to property owners to begin the negotiation and acquisition process for the areas that were needed for widening the roadway on Harriman Highway 131 South, Harriman Main Street. It's got a lot of names depending on where you're at on it. So then after a couple of months of negotiations, most of those negotiations went well. There were a few properties that we discussed here in a city council meeting and that were voted on to use eminent domain due to stalling of negotiations and the inability to move forward on those negotiations. So that was in March. Shortly after that, we had been working with an entity. Ivory Homes had owned a parcel along the road that we had worked with an agreement with them to dedicate a portion of the property that they owned for the roadway widening project, and the remaining portion would go to Danzy Rentals LLC. So they worked to do that, and in April of 2023, Ivory had let us know, hey, the deeds have been recorded. Go take a look at them. They should be all good to go. So we're like, okay, great. That's all cleared, good to go. As we looked into it, the deeds that Ivory recorded with the county did not match what we had asked them to do, which was to match our widening area to dedicate to the city, and then the rest to go to Danzy Rentals. And so there's a slight sliver that was off, that was an error in the deed that they recorded that we still needed for the Harriman Main Street widening project. So at that point, we discussed acquisition from Danzy Rentals LLC to obtain that area beyond what was already dedicated to the city through Ivory. So that was in April. Right after we find that out, we prepared an offer and sent an offer in April to purchase the property that was needed. Since then, we've reached out a few times, and additionally, this is a property owner that's been being dealt with on other parcels as well. So the city had hoped to come to a deal with them separate from eminent domain, separate from court, but there was no response to our offers. And so to move the project along, we have brought this parcel for consideration for eminent domain today. And I can kind of answer any questions that there are on the parcel, the process, how we got where we were. But that's kind of a quick, in a nutshell, how we got to today.
What's the additional square feet that we're short?
I think it's 182 feet that we are short.
Square feet, linear feet?
Square feet.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Bryce?
Currently, we have two options here, to move forward or to not, right? How does that delay, impede, or cost affect the current project?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So this portion is right on the outside of our widening of the roadway. So it's right where the sidewalk would go, this piece. So in your packet, the last document that's part of this report, it kind of zooms in on that area and shows where this acquisition area is. And it is about 2 to 3 feet of the sidewalk that we need. So it would, without access to this property, the sidewalk would not be able to be installed at this location. And so if we chose not to vote to use eminent domain, we would still need to gain access to the property, which would mean that we would have to come to a deal with the property owner, which we have been unsuccessful up in the last 2.5 months that negotiations have been going on. And so it would likely mean deleting the sidewalk in that area for the project if we weren't able to gain access to the property. There could be some considerations in changing the design, but it gets a little bit more complicated when you do it just for a little section of the road. The sidewalk maybe could jog in and come right up against the curb, but that's not ideal for those walking, for those riding their bike. The landscaping goes away, the buffer goes away, the driveway kind of gets impacted by that. So, there is some ways to kind of think of that if that is the route we want to
go. Another question, so maybe Todd, how does this coincide or align with the current eminent domain on the other properties? Is it a separate issue, separate timeline?
Yeah, it's currently a separate timeline, but in similar situations, the court might merge the two cases once they get to the point where merger is appropriate.
And we're at an impasse on our current negotiation for the other parcels currently, correct?
Yeah, we're still in litigation on that.
Okay, let's move to the...
Yeah, any other questions?
Let's move to the public hearing, then we can come back. And one note on this public hearing today, under Utah Code per our city attorney, the owner of the property, we can take comment from the owner of the property. However, if, for example, Boyd and Clyde, if you want to assign Chad as your agent, you can assign him as an agent, and he has 2 minutes. So. No, we can take one period of 2 minutes tonight, so. No, 1 2 minute per property. So we've got one property tonight.
It'd be 2 minutes per person.
Per person, okay. How can, go ahead, hey, Chad, please let us, we're not trying to.
So my advice would be if someone's going to act as the agent, then that agent be given 2 minutes. But if the property owners want to speak separately, then they could each get 2 minutes.
But not combine them all, though.
Right.
Okay.
So then I have a question, though. If you're representing a group, you get 5 minutes. So do they represent a group?
No, this is an agent, so it's not, it's not a group. So the entity under condemnation is Danzy Rentals LLC. So if there's an agent, then
So it's the one
that's for that
property
one.
tonight under question?
One property, yeah.
Okay, so we have 2 minutes. You can decide how to do 2 minutes.
According to your code, your ordinances, in your code, you say if you're representing multiple people.
That doesn't apply to this public hearing. Chad, that does not apply to this. Per our legal counsel, that does not apply. 2 minutes. You can have 2 minutes, Chad.
I want my 2 minutes after he's through.
Oh, started already. Earlier today, I talked about the rights of man and the moral reasons why eminent domain should not be used by Harriman City. Now I will discuss the monetary reasons why eminent domain is a bad decision financially for Harriman City. First, eminent domain does not add value, it only destroys value. Eminent domain tolerates government's ability to acquire property from unwilling sellers for public use, but does so at an artificially and unjust low price. It is supposed to provide a seller with the market price for the property under the assumption of a seller and buyer negotiating willingly. Unfortunately, this process of eminent domain disregards the core concept of subjective value inherent in a willing seller, instead compensates the seller with an artificially low selling price. All eminent domain does is reallocate property from a higher value to a lower value use, as exemplified by the unwillingness of the government to pay the price required to obtain the property voluntarily. We are willing to sell, but not at an artificially low price set by Harriman City. Unfortunately, Harriman City has refused all of our negotiations and is unwilling to compromise on price. Second, eminent domain is costly to cities in terms of litigation, project delays, and frustration. Currently, I am involved in an unnecessary eminent domain conflict with Harriman City on several other properties due to your city lawyer and engineer's unwillingness to negotiate. We have tried negotiating with Harriman City, but were forced into litigation by your eminent domain proceedings. Eminent domain does not bring compromise in negotiation, but only conflict. Prior to your vote for eminent domain, it appeared we had a compromise that could have been easily reached. Since then, Harriman City has had 5 months of legal troubles and no occupancy for the city. This has caused project delays, additional court costs due to the need to hire additional outside attorneys, and cost overruns, such as the recent $150,000 overrun to WC Engineering on June 14th. This has easily cost the city an estimated $300,000 to $500,000. What a waste of money that should have been used in a productive manner in compensating landowners instead of arguing over an artificially low selling price. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm Claudia Danzy. I live at 7041 West. We also own properties 7075, 7125, 6607, and 6642. So 5 properties. At our last negotiation in early July, the city could have resolved the issue of occupancy for a measly $7,000 needed to provide proper fencing so our cattle and sheep would not escape and get hit by traffic on the road. Instead, the Harriman City attorney decided to continue fighting, costing the city at least an additional $10,000 to $15,000. Eminent domain does not add value, but just destroys value and causes confrontation. Would you like to resolve the issue of occupancy right now? I would. Provide the proper fencing requested so that my cattle and sheep do not escape and get hit by traffic, and the deal is made. This would only cost you a measly $7,000 addition. Vote for eminent domain, and it will cost you months of delays, tens of thousands in court costs, and frustration to all involved. Remove the lawyers, the obstacles, the litigation, the conflict. Let's make a deal. Abraham Lincoln once wrote, "Resolve to be honest in all events, and if on your own judgment you cannot be an honest lawyer, resolve to be honest without being a lawyer." Let's make a deal. Do not allow litigation bring misery. I would also like to say that Harriman has deflated property costs on their evaluations and their appraisals for their own benefit, while they inflate the cost of fencing. So they want us to pay the difference. Also, I was at the hearing with the lawyers, and I can say that there has been misrepresentation. It was told that we wanted subdivision fencing, which is complete lie. We have never asked that. We don't want that. All we want is fencing for our cattle. It is a 4.5-foot fence, which has netting at the bottom, 2 things of barbed wire made with cedar posts and posts that are metal. That was told to lawyers, that was told to the judge, which is a complete misrepresentation. Thank you.
Thank you both.
So yeah, I have lots of questions. Are you ready to go
Yep,
there?
go ahead.
Okay, so we discussed the fence. It has what's going on with the fence? Was the offer made to these guys to, I don't even know if we can discuss it here or not. I don't know what the rules are, but did we provide them with an offer to put in the fence?
Because this is active litigation, I think it would be more appropriate to talk about it in closed meeting.
Okay.
This one is just this property.
Okay, okay. So this particular property that we're talking about today has no livestock fencing on it, correct?
It has our livestock fencing on it, which they want to remove without putting a temporary fence up that will, they just want to move the fence, which will destroy the fence.
Was it?
Well, on just this property.
I think Bryce could answer that
Okay.
better than I could.
Yeah, so the properties that we've previously talked about in another meeting do have livestock fencing. The one we're talking about today does not.
Okay.
It does have livestock fencing, sir. It does have fence on it. It's chain link fence.
Got it.
You got news to
Right.
look at.
You can control the.
Okay, we need, okay, you've had, okay. Okay.
Sorry.
What other questions, Sherry?
No, I just am frustrated by this. I'm frustrated that it's back, first of all, because I thought this was dealt with, and it wasn't till this agenda that I knew that we still had another piece of property that was like this, so that's frustrating to me. Anyway, I'll let someone else talk for a minute.
So just a couple things, yeah. Just, my understanding is this property was owned by Ivory Homes and was deeded to the current landowner by mistake. It was supposed to be deeded to the city, and that it became their property 4 months ago that it was deeded to them. And that if it would have been deeded to us correctly, this wouldn't have even been an issue.
That's fairly close. There's a portion of property that was dedicated to the city. And we asked them to dedicate the complete right-of-way that we needed for the roadway project. So in their dedication, it was a little bit too narrow, and then they gave the remainder to Danzy Rentals LLC. So we're asking for that portion that we asked to get but didn't. And unfortunately, Ivory Homes, there wasn't a written agreement, so it's not like we would go after them for something that wasn't in a written agreement.
But it did become their property roughly 4 months ago.
Yeah, it became their property after the last eminent domain hearing that we had. So it's an unfortunate situation for sure.
Got it. I'm just going to say a couple things just because I think it's appropriate to say in this kind of a meeting. Number one is that reasonable people can have disagreements. It doesn't necessarily mean a character flaw on anybody's part that there is a difference of opinion on how things should be resolved. What I find distasteful are the insults made to city staff and or this council as if we have acted in any way immoral or inappropriately. That's frankly offensive. The rights of eminent domain have been a part of law since 1215 in the Magna Carta. It was a part of English common law since 1215. It was brought to the colonies by English settlers. It was enshrined in our Constitution and is laid out in the Fifth Amendment. It does not say that the government cannot take property. It says that the government can't do it without due process and market compensation. We are doing both of those. Because there is a disagreement on what that market value is not mean that the city is doing anything inappropriate or untoward in this manner. We are acting with integrity and honesty and transparency. We do not determine the value of a property. We hire competent third-party appraisers who come out and value that property. If there is a disagreement, there are other appraisers that can be contacted to do a separate appraisal of that market value. We will pay what that market value is for this property. Nobody is going to be deprived of the fair market value of any property. That is just simply untrue. And I'm frankly just frustrated that as a city, we have to keep dealing with these insults and this, frankly, orneriness over something that's very, very simple. And I think that this council should vote in favor of this.
Okay, I will just go back to a few comments about due process, arbitrary force, and eroding public trust that was in your first comments earlier this evening. And I think that part of the public trust that is placed in us is to be fiscally responsible with taxpayer funds. I have had a few, I can't say several because there's not a ton of property owners that have owned property along that road for many, many decades. But a few of the ones that have reached out to me since the last eminent domain hearing and said, we remember decades ago when the county came out and asked us to sign over right-of-way for that property because we didn't want to have to pay taxes on it. So my point is, I don't know where the argument is on some of this. It's like, well, we own this part, or we don't own this part. And that, because there is just a roadblock there that says, this entity says this, and this person says this, I need somebody to figure that out. This is the same conversation that we had a few months ago. And that's why it's going through this process, is because this party feels adamant it's this, and this party feels adamant it's that. And so there's a disagreement there. And so we have to have a third party come in and say, well, here's what the law shows. And then, so I don't erode public trust, I have to allow that to happen, because I can't just write a check, or we can't just authorize writing a check for something that we don't have clear demonstration of ownership of. So that was the process in my mind that we were going through, is just to try and figure that out. I think, and I don't want to, this is a different piece of property, and I understand that, but I wholeheartedly agree with Steve's sentiment in that there is a process, and that's what we're going through. I have
responded to every email that was sent to me. There was a request for a meeting. I sent back dates and times that we'd be more than happy to meet, and I've not received a response back for that. So I guess I just would say that I think that we're trying to have conversations and get to where we can all move forward on this. And you're right, it's costing extra money for litigation, and we don't want that any more than you do. And so I just think we just have to sit down and have a conversation. But the problem is I don't see that we can get past some of the issues without having a mediator say, here's what the ownership is. And then the chips will fall where they may on those kinds of things. But I don't know if we can't negotiate a deal, and it sounds like there's been efforts put forth for the last little while to negotiate a deal. And I'll tell you the same thing I said last time after the hearing, is that we're not saying that we're not going to negotiate. Sit down and negotiate. Again, respond to my email about the meetings. Let's have the meeting and see if we can't come up with something, an equitable situation to where we can move forward.
Any other comments?
I've got a couple, yeah.
Two quick ones.
So pulling up on Google Street View, there is a chain link fence across the front of the one property and about 3/4 of the other property with some privacy slats. It doesn't look like it's totally fenced off, but in no way, shape, or form that fence can't be moved back to the property line or the construction line and reused. It's just fence post. Or a temporary fence put up to imitate that until the final fence was reached, right? On these two parcels is what I see. What was I didn't see any numbers on here, the appraisal value of the 188 square feet.
In that, the council's determination is whether there's authority to enter these eminent domain proceedings as laid out in the resolution. It's not necessarily for the council to figure out the value and negotiate with the property owner.
But there was a fair offer made from the appraisal, and it was rejected. Okay.
Aaron?
I think that's all.
Okay.
I just have two, hopefully relatively quick comments. There's been kind of, I think, two major things referenced in this conversation tonight. The one that we're here for tonight is this particular piece of property that I think is pretty clear cut, and I'm in favor of moving forward with this process for all the reasons that have been mentioned. I'll make a general comment about the overall process of this entire project and the eminent domain process. Eminent domain is, in my view, correct me if I'm way out of line here, but is there really for two purposes. One is when there's a public need and not a willing seller, right? And then there's the property owner in that case, a lot of times is saying it's a taking when the public need is there and you don't have a willing seller. That's not, I don't believe that's the case here. The road is there, it has been for 100-some years. I don't think there's any dispute on where the road is and that this work needs to be done. The only dispute is on price of property. We can't come to an agreement. The legal system, the eminent domain process in this particular piece of it simply is simply how that disagreement is settled fairly by a third party, our judicial system. That's it. It's a process. There's nothing good, bad, or otherwise about it. We can't agree. Someone else gets to help us settle it. That's it.
Okay. I'll look for a motion then at this point on this. Again, we're just talking this one.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution.
Oh, yeah, we need to close the public, sorry.
Oh. Motion to close public hearing.
All in favor?
Aye. Motion to approve resolution number R34-2023, authorizing eminent domain proceedings with respect to Harriman Main Street.
A second.
Motion by Jared, second by Steve. Jared?
Yes.
Teddy?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. That motion carries. Move on to item 10, the consent agenda. Look for an approval, or if we need to move something off of that. Steve?
I was going to ask something about the economic development study, but it's okay.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as written.
Motion by Teddy, second by Jared. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Oh,
That's a roll call
sorry.
Oh, jeez.
I'm all off tonight. Steve?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Teddy?
Yes.
Jared?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. That motion carries. Item 11.1, consideration of a land transfer and development agreement with MLM Holdings. Blake?
Good evening. So this is an item that we discussed at the last council meeting. I didn't have a resolution ready for it, so it seemed like the council was ready to approve at that time, but we didn't have the resolution. So just as a reminder, this is a parcel that the city owns, approximately 4.6 acres at about 12120 South Harriman Main Street. And this is a parcel that was identified as a site that MLM Holdings would like to construct a baseball training facility at. In exchange for the property, there are some obligations by MLM Holdings in the agreement to relocate Copper Creek, relocate the asphalt trail, relocate the pedestrian bridge, and construct a asphalt parking lot for the city. In addition to them constructing their facility and some certain timelines of when those things need to be accomplished. So be happy to answer any questions you have at this time if you have any on that. If not, the staff recommends approval for this agreement.
I'll say fantastic job on this.
Yep.
It was not easy, and we asked for a lot of abnormal things, which come to fruition, at least in my opinion, very nicely. So thanks to all for work on it.
Yep.
Yeah, good work on staff and good work on the partnership. So
Yep.
it's,
Yeah, ditto.
Okay, look for a motion then.
Motion to approve a land transfer agreement between Harriman City and MLM Holdings.
Second.
Motion by Jared, second by Steve. Steve?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Teddy?
Yes.
Jared?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. That motion carries.
Skip transfer.
Item 11.2, discussion and consideration of a reimbursement agreement for the reserves at Sky Ranch. JB, welcome back.
All right. Good evening, Mayor and Council. For this particular project, this is the third reimbursement agreement that we've come to the council for. The first two were approved. One was Water Enterprise, the other one was Transportation Impact, and then this one that is before you is Water Impact Fee for a new secondary water line that was installed along 134th, which is along the frontage of the reserves at Sky Ranch. Destiny, by chance, do you happen to have the presentation on that? It's okay if you don't. Okay. It's pretty easy. Again, it's just a segment of secondary water line along the frontage of the reserves at Sky Ranch at approximately 6400 West. At the time we were talking about this, there was a misunderstanding there. Well, excuse me, they were not pursuing reimbursement for this particular project, but a later time came, said, let's do this reimbursement agreement to get paid retroactively for these improvements, and understood the possibility of this being a pending action, right, for a reimbursement agreement. This has been budgeted, but the agreement has not been put into place. So at this point, again, we have the infrastructure installed. It's just a little over $150,000, the actual cost, but the understood and budgeted amount was $150,000, and developer was okay with that amount. And again, it would be reimbursed with water impact fees as their project continues and we receive those funds from that specific project. I think that's about it. Are there any questions for me at this time?
Was it a system improvement then, JB, was there? Was it a system improvement then? I mean, not just
That's correct. So it is all attributed to development as opposed to an existing deficiency, 100% eligible for reimbursement for water impact.
Okay.
Why did they choose? I mean, that's their choice, but a silly question, everyone. They chose to push pause on it or not come at the beginning.
Like I say, in the beginning, there was a little bit of a misunderstanding on its ability to be reimbursed. They came back and then clarified and said, hey, we do want to do this reimbursement. There's a little more to that. That's a little bit of an oversimplification on the situation, but essentially that's what it was. And they were eligible. So after clarification, of course, like, yeah, let's do this reimbursement agreement.
Yes, that's my main question, is after all of that, staff's recommendation is?
Yes.
It's eligible,
Yeah, and like I say, it has been budgeted, sorry,
No, staff's recommendation is to proceed with this reimbursement agreement.
that is
Not
correct.
just that it's eligible for that, but that we should do that.
That it should be correct. I apologize. I did not include that on the staff report, but the recommendation would be to approve for that the reimbursement agreement. And it was budgeted, but agreement was not in place. Of course, we just wanted to make sure that that would be pending this approval or not.
Motion?
Yep.
I make a motion to approve a reimbursement agreement for the reserves at Sky Ranch.
Motion by Sherry.
Second.
Second by Teddy. Steve?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Teddy?
Yes.
Jared?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. That motion carries. Thank you, JB. 11.3, discussion and consideration of a text amendment relating to parking and snow removal. BA.
Mayor, council, thank you. Yeah, we came to you in a work meeting back in March to discuss on-street parking, snow parking, winter-related parking, and some snow removal amendments to city ordinance. We took your recommendations. I worked with Todd, city attorney, and we've put together from the draft that we presented to you before what we hope is a final ordinance amendment, and that's in your packet. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to try and answer those for you.
I have a few. 6-5-5, parking prohibited when in addition to HCC 65, it's unlawful for any person who owns or has possession, custody, or control of any vehicle or trailer to park or knowingly allow any vehicle or trailer to park on any street or city right-of-way. So if you have your little, I don't know, your little four-wheeler trailer on and you park along the curb outside your house overnight, you're in violation, right?
Sorry, tell me the ordinance
Sorry.
you were reading.
Yeah, it's 6-5-5 is parking prohibited when, and it's number A, it's the first part of that. So I'm just thinking, gosh, if you parked on the curb outside your house overnight and you had your trailer on or something, you're in violation, right?
Well, it's specific to those four things below. So in a manner that
Okay.
obstructs the snow removal,
it's-
passage of emergency vehicles and snow plows.
Perfect.
So any of those four items below that, if you park on the street and cause one of those four things to occur, then it would be a violation,
Okay.
but not simply parking there.
Perfect. I just wanted to clarify that because sometimes they get jumbled for me.
Sure.
And then roads that are divided by a landscape median with one-way travel in each direction are exempt from the odd-even parking. So you can park on a street that has only one-way travel as long as you don't impede the rest of those people, right?
So the language there is specific. So what we talked about in that work meeting was odd even street on a single roadway. So for instance, what Todd and I talked about is the roadway between the end of the U Road and McDonald's or CVS there has that raised median. There is parking on both sides, so we would not restrict that to odd or even. There's designated parking on both sides, so that would allow for parking there, where we're talking simply about a single residential street where we're going to ask people to park on the even side during a snow event so that the emergency vehicles, snow plows, things of that nature can get through there. So we're not double stacked on both sides of the road, but on
Perfect.
those streets that have the width and the room, we're going to exempt those particular streets. Or if there's signage specifically indicating that you cannot park on the even side for whatever reason, we're not going to override that signage.
Perfect. And then I guess in addition, just thank you. This is a big task, and thank you for going through it thoroughly and making these adjustments. I hopeful as we roll this out and people become more accustomed to it, it will accommodate some on-street parking because, quite frankly, there's a lot of areas that there isn't adequate parking and they have to park on the street. But it allows us to have some control over that. So
Thank you for the
Sure.
work on that.
And I think that was the direction we got. It's, we need something, but how do we manage the something? And that's what I hope we accomplished here, was a compromise that gives people a place to park and allows our crews and our emergency vehicles to get in and out when they need to. Hopefully this will accomplish both of those things.
Yeah, and thank you for adding the extra definition of, I can't remember, the extreme event or something, so that there is some time allotted if there's crazy amount of snow. That was a good compromise on there, I think.
Yeah, we put that in there, and that's specific to snow removal, because that was a big issue for us last year. And we recognize that, you know, we need a time frame that's reasonable for people that, you know, are here all night to get home and shovel their driveway after it snowed at 9 a.m. this morning. And if there's a large amount of snow, it's a significant undertaking for people, so.
Yeah, thank you.
How often does he come to these meetings and he's throwing these jabs out? Yeah, he's.
I mean, it's not all night, it's only 9. It could end up wrapping up here pretty quick, right?
Yeah, we wish.
I concur with Sherry's sentiments there and statements, but I think we should over-notice really early start of the snow season. And I know you guys do education first, so this is something that we're going to have to really get ingrained into the citizens, because old habits are hard. And obviously, our last snow season showed our lack, but also when government fixes a problem, we create others. So we'll have some other fallout, I'm sure, but
sure,
it's really good.
And I know we did a crosswalk video, for instance, recently. We probably need some type of a PSA as we get close to the fall to start pushing that out to our residents, so that they understand these changes and we're not chasing our tail trying to get people to comply with an ordinance they don't know that we've enacted. So.
Yeah.
I should have received a citation the other morning, because I did not see a bicyclist in the zebra crosswalk.
Did you not get my complaint?
No, did you? He emailed it in. I pulled an oops. I'm like, oh crap. So
Why are we admitting stuff like
I don't
this?
know. It's not on camera.
It's not even related to this.
Well, he's talking about the crosswalk video. So brought it to mind.
Is it snow related? We'll probably include Santa Claus in the video.
Nice.
If you know
Good
anybody.
thinking.
Well,
Love it.
I might have a connection.
Oh my gosh.
Ready for a motion?
Yes,
Mayor?
let's take a motion.
Sure. A motion to approve ordinance number 2023-13, amending Harriman City Code Section 6-1-2, definitions, 6-5-1, parking prohibited in specific areas, 6-5-5, parking prohibited when, and 7-6-6, snow removal, relating to various rules and regulations for parking and snow removal.
Motion by Steve.
Second.
Second by Sherry. Jared.
Yes.
Teddy.
Yes.
Sherry.
Yes.
Steve.
Yes.
And I vote yes, that motion carries. Thank you, BA. I truly appreciate your work on it. 11.4, discussion and consideration of a recommendation to amend Title 10 of Harriman City Code to clarify zoning definitions and regulations for fencing, off-street parking, property maintenance, setback measurements, and non-substantive technical correction. I think you put that word in there just to...
We like to affectionately call this the boxcar bill, and just a collection of different things that we have gathered over time that we felt would require correction. And we also worked with our community services department in identifying a few things that would help them also do code enforcement. So this is the overview of those text amendments that were in your packet, and I'll just go through each one briefly. So the first one is, we do have a standard in our ordinance. It's called Rules of Interpretation of how we interpret words and terms in our code. And typically, when there is a disagreement, it's usually from a property owner or applicant who may be arguing or just simply just not in agreement with staff is how we have interpreted and applied our codes. You can see I included in your packet this section, and it talks about how we rely on the common use of words and phrases, and then certain other words that are technical in nature are also defined. But in a previous city where I've worked for, we sometimes even had to rely on specific words, and of course we don't define every word in our code. And we would refer to a standard dictionary. And I discussed this with our city attorney, Todd Sheeran, if he would be comfortable if we added this last layer of how do we define when we have a disagreement on the meaning of a term. We have a formal administrative interpretation process. That process is subject to an appeal. So that even after this level of detail, if there's still disagreement, there's an opportunity for someone to appear before a hearing officer or even potentially go to district court. So this was an amendment to that section of the code. Any questions about that proposal? Okay. The next one is weeds. This again came from our code enforcement team, just saying that they wanted a better definition. This was a definition that they had put together, relying on other terms that they had come across in state code, consistent with best practices. And so we're just adding that definition in our ordinance. We noticed also in zoning that typically when you're measuring lot width, kind of older standard codes would just simply go right at the property line for how wide your lot is. There's a minimum lot width requirement. Harriman is not unique, but we have been measuring like further into the lot depth. And typically that's at the front yard setback line. But we've noticed that there were disagreement in our setback measurement locations for lot widths. And so these adjustments that you're seeing in this section of the code amendment is just being consistent with the front line setback. So we're not introducing anything that's different other than what is that front line setback. That's where we're going to identify where we're going to measure the lot width. There were changes in the code. You can see where it says it was 30 feet in R110, but the front yard setback in the R110 zone is actually 25 feet. Why was it 30? My guess is at one time it used to be 30 and we had changed the setback to 25, but we just didn't correct this section of the code, this table. So it's just making it consistent with the predetermined front yard setbacks for the lot widths.
On R2-10, you didn't just keep it at 25 and you went to 24?
Yeah, we're just, again, just being consistent with whatever was previously established. Yeah, so it's 24 in other sections of the code, so we just adjusted it to that. Yeah. The next one is on walls along collector and arterial streets. So this map you saw previously tonight. We have an ordinance that says that when we're doing development on these streets, we want to limit access. We don't want to approve new driveways. And we also want to get these sound walls or these masonry walls along these roads. But occasionally we've had some issues where there's an older historic piece of property that is now on one of these arterial collector streets. And it's been a couple of years since we did this, but we had a situation where it just did not make any sense to have that masonry wall in front of essentially historically their front yard. And we didn't really have an exception around it. We didn't have an administrative tool that would accommodate that. So we're just saying if it's a plat that was legally recorded before we incorporated, there's an opportunity for the community development director to waive that requirement. And then when we do subdivision review today, our standards, we would always identify other ways of accessing that property for a future subdivision. But again, there may be maybe a corner parcel or something that historically just has access off of these roads. And as part of a subdivision review, it's possible that we might, with the community development director's approval, allow that home to front onto a collector arterial. Very rare, but it has been kind of an annoying issue, and it's just been on my bucket list of just introducing that exception. It was something that I discussed with Blake, and we were comfortable with.
I have a question about
Yes.
that. Just because I don't understand what you're trying to say. If they're coming in for a subdivision, you can allow that? Because if they're already a lot and they don't have to put up a wall. So this is just for a new subdivision, because it doesn't state that in here. It just says you can make a waiver for anything. And even if they're not in compliance, they don't have to be in compliance because they're already existing. So this is just...
I think where we had this issue is, we also have a requirement that in order to build on essentially a property, you have to have it platted. Sometimes there are historic lots that haven't gone through a subdivision process. So they're not changing anything, it's a vacant piece of ground, but historically it's just been recognized as a legal lot, but it was never platted. And so once it kicks into that new process, you know, we're supposed to follow all the current standards.
Then that
so,
makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, the next one is dealing with double fencing. I think there is good reason why, as a city, we've been pretty aggressive on this in the past. But occasionally we have issues where we don't have agreement between two adjoining property owners. And of course, we're dealing with trying to mitigate incompatible land uses, typically between commercial and residential. We've had a few issues over the last couple of years where the two adjacent property owners were just not able to resolve the difference. And consulting with our city attorney, it was decided that, I'm not sure, Todd, what the right legal rationale is, but essentially we would allow the double fence, but we didn't have that kind of administrative tool in our code. And so this again would give the community development director the opportunity, because I think primarily we believe that those fences are important to mitigate those potential negative impacts. And we would rather have that newer, more secure wall than say, well, you can't have that wall, we're just gonna have to keep whatever fence is there right now. So this would allow, in very limited circumstances, a double fence when trying to deal with that issue.
Same as on agriculture, I have this
Yeah.
exact same look. There's a vinyl fence instead of a wood fence, but it's because the vinyl fence isn't adequate for any kind of.
And we do make exceptions, that's already in the ordinance when we're dealing with large animal rights. Yeah. You can have a double fence, but it has to be separated, I think it's by 6 feet. But again, you're just wasting land when you're doing that. So. Okay, next one was just, part of that was just fence maintenance. Our code enforcement team just wanted a little more language in here saying that we wanted to make sure that all fences must be maintained in good condition and free from damage, breaks, or missing parts. Another one was just dealing with parking and where we allow, storage of personal vehicles. One of the big things is trying to say you can park on a driveway, but that driveway needs to go to a legal place to park your car. You know, this is not in Harriman, but we're trying to avoid the scenario where you're just, paving essentially your front yard for parking. So you can park in a garage, you can park in a carport, you can park in your side yard, you can park in the rear yard. But if you have a driveway, the driveway should go to one of these legal parking spots.
So I agree with that in concept, but the problem I have too is maybe you have a big family and we don't want everybody parking on the street. So if you accommodate I know I have an in-law that has they widened out their driveway and they made a couple of stalls, like horizontal stalls, so that everybody can park off the street, but you're not going to be able to enter the garage from there. So how are we accommodating that?
So that driveway would go to a legal spot to park your car, which would be in essentially like the side yard or another place that would be legal to park a car. You can park your car on the driveway, of course, but it needs to be leading to a legal parking place, not an illegal one.
Can you park your car on grass?
No. Yeah.
In this,
Right.
And then this might be a question for BA or chief or someone else. When I look at this picture, they went to expense to put the
Not park on
concrete
the
in, and they're not parking on the street. What's the problem that we're trying?
If I might, really the problem here is this entire removing all front yard landscaping for asphalt or concrete. It does cause problems over time, especially having worked in older cities where you see this. Your drainage is not usually designed for this much hardscape. This is better than parking on the lawn, but I would say it's just barely better. It is appropriate to say you have to park on an improved surface. We should be flexible on where we allow that. But in this instance, you've got the entire frontage is all, I was thinking that might even be my last town. That entire frontage is now concrete.
Is
It's
it an
just,
aesthetics thing?
it
Is
is,
there more than
it's
just
an
Property
aesthetics,
value.
property values for the neighbors. And in this, you see they have multiple curb cuts that may or may not have been permitted. And so you start to grade your curbs. So there are reasons why you don't want this. The other piece goes, and we can probably pick this in another areas, storage of vehicles, inoperable vehicles. They just park them in front. It's on concrete, but now you've got 3 or 4 inoperable vehicles sitting in front of this house. That's also a code issue over time. The neighbors become negatively impacted by that action.
This is why you live in an HOA.
And that can be addressed through another code, right, inoperable vehicles. I just get a little bit hesitant over, like, would you rather see all 4 of these cars parked along the street?
Yes.
Really, during the snow event?
Well, that's the thing, is that was my first thought, is like, there's, just in my neighborhood, there's more and more homes where there's, Chief and I talked about this the other day, there's 2, 3, and 4 families living there, and there's cars everywhere. I'd rather them be off the street in a reasonable manner. So I'm just asking what the problem is we're
Well, and
trying to solve with it.
If I may, we've received some complaints about vehicles parking on grass. Before I worked here, I worked in some cities north of here that were much older cities, and Nathan and I have talked about this. It truly is, when you start to park on lawn, the first step to some urban decay in those neighborhoods. We're starting to see that occasionally here, yet we didn't have the ability to really enforce much of it. We encouraged them to move it off of the lawn. The question for how much space in front of the house would be available to park and what would be vegetation, I don't know. But I do know that in those neighborhoods that I have worked in, when you start to see that, they tend to deteriorate very quickly. And so really, it's an effort to make sure that we maintain some order and decency in the neighborhood.
Yeah, I agree on the grass, but this clearly is like a maintain money put into putting appropriate parking and stuff. So I guess I just am a little bit hesitant on
And
how far we go.
that's why I think aesthetics is a reason, look and feel, and the dilapidation, all the things you mentioned. I'm more comfortable with some other supporting reasons of safety and engineering. If there's those types of reasons as well, then that makes sense.
And Councilor Henderson and I have talked about the reality that we're facing in Harriman of more than one family living in a home. They're starting to move into the basement, and that's becoming a separate living space, and that's fine. It just is going to present us parking problems.
Yeah.
The reality of that, and there's no real way around that. That's just what's going to happen. So,
In this example, I mean, it might be a poor example, but it also looks like there may be a secondary housing unit in that structure, right? So you can see 2 or 3 families living there. And I know there's a house just down the street that has the diagonal parking. They've got a 3-car garage, but RV on the side with 3 or 4 other vehicles. They do have a basement apartment as well, so, and then kids coming home. I don't have teenagers yet, thank goodness, but they'll all have their own vehicles, and I don't have driveway space for that.
And the problem is in Harriman, when you say, like, even rear yard, have you seen how close some of our houses are? You can't drive to the rear yard. There's no access to rear yards to park. So it's like, what's the solution?
And then with the xeriscaping or, water-wise landscaping, they're gonna improve it with gravel, rock, and then some vegetation. I think we're gonna see more and more of this. And I don't know how you.
We have a certain requirement of so much of your front yard has to be, can't just be all.
Yeah, and we are working on another update to our landscape standards, which will limit, of course, where you can legally park. So, I mean, if this is something, a piece of this amendment you would rather maybe defer in concert with landscaping update, we could do that. But in general, these kinds of things do have an impact on property value. As Nathan said, it increases stormwater runoff, which our systems were not designed for. You can also see how it creates additional points of conflict between pedestrians and vehicles. It's just an uncontrolled You're just using everything you can for parking. You can go too far, right, and not find that balance.
Sorry, I'm concerned.
Oh, yeah, I agree with that.
That is something that there is
Yeah.
to start to, my principle.
Certainly, if there's room to park a car in a legal place, we're not going to deny the opportunity to pave that. We're just trying to encourage that there are certain places where it's okay and where it's not okay.
I'll put my 2 cents, and then I think, like you said, there could be something, if we vote on one thing, it could have, I think we move ahead with something like this based on, I think there's been enough talk. I think then if something down the road, we hear something, this creates issues, then I think we could readdress it, but I'd rather limit this now and then come back if there are issues, and that's personally where I'm at, so.
So, and I guess then parking location on an approved parking surface. I park my trailers and stuff I have a gravel driveway, and it gets dusty. And I park my trailers and stuff back there. Are you saying that you expect all that to be concrete or asphalt or all-weather surfacing material?
Yeah, the very next section, it says that it should be paved with asphalt, concrete, or some other well-weather surface material in accordance with city specifications. So you can do alternate materials that are allowed under our city engineering standards, but we also want to make sure that's defined, that it's a defined location and not just kind of a free-for-all in your landscape or your backyard. It should be a specific place that has, like a certain depth to the material.
I don't know. I sometimes park my trailer in the mud. So that's where I can access. So I have to look at, do I want to create an ordinance that puts me in non-compliance too? And if I'm in agricultural zone and I have mud, then maybe I park in the mud. I don't know. Sometimes I think we overreach on some things.
Yeah, to that point, Sherry, not only, parking in mud or taking the debris onto the road surface, right? That's why you have track offs and stuff. But I could see that being an issue on more ag land and unimproved dirt, side lots, yards. Because you do find construction workers and other entities for taking that on the roadway, so.
And that, Sherry, your comment about RV storage and things like that and recreational vehicles, that's the next part where we're saying that there's a larger recreational vehicle amendment that's coming. It was part of this boxcar bill. I'm sure you're aware that the Planning Commission has had several meetings on this. We had a field trip last week on it. We're hoping that at our meeting in August, we'll have another hearing and hopefully a recommendation from the commission that would come to you. But we felt like this part of it, just defining storage of a recreational vehicle shall be within a side or rear yard of a dwelling on an approved parking surface. No portion of a recreational vehicle, including a trailer, may encroach into a public or private right-of-way. So it just felt like that was generic enough and that would help some of the code enforcement problems that we're having right now. Another thing that you'll notice is that we included the title, or it said recreational vehicle parking in residential zones. It did not include agricultural. In the past, we've kind of said, well, it's a residential use, but we're just more clearly defining that so many of our agricultural zones, as we know, are really just residential use. And they don't operate any differently than our residential zones generally. And so we wanted to add that language saying that this is for both ag and residential zones in the city. Again, if that's a piece that you feel like you want to maybe separate, there's going to be another RV bill coming to you, hopefully sooner than later.
For me, to answer your question, I agree with the mayor on this. You've answered my question sufficiently, and I'm good with this for now. It's something we can always, that's the thing, we can always come back and change them as we experience different things. I just wanted to be able to explain the reasons why, right? If one of my constituents contacts me and says, hey, what the heck is this? And I say, well, they told me that's just the code and didn't give me any explanation why. It doesn't make sense. I need some real reasons to tell them why we've done that. So I'm good.
Sorry, how do you define recreational vehicle?
I did not include that reference in here, and that is changing, and I don't remember what that draft is.
So see, I guess my only concern is then that's premature. If that's changing and you're changing an ordinance to say recreational vehicles and then you come behind it and change the definition of recreational vehicles, this might have a whole different meaning once you change the definition, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but obviously that's a definition that will come to you.
Yeah.
So it's just whatever is in the current code, and I apologize, I did not include that as a reference.
I'm just maybe making a mountain of a molehill.
We probably are, but
We never do that.
I have a concern of like throwing it out there and trying to encapsulate 100% of this at stage one, when I think there's some massaging from these last two that need a little bit of working on. And if you have more text change coming up, specifically to parking, specifically to RV, that we might be a little ahead of the steam on these two ones.
To the RV, I don't have another one on parking per se.
Okay.
We will have an update on the landscaping.
Okay.
So that's where if you feel like you want to affect, like how much of the front yard could be hard surfaced, you have an opportunity to define that.
On this parking one, all this doing is adding agricultural. It's not changing anything else other than saying adding agricultural and residential.
Into the RV side,
Yeah.
I don't know. I just have a little bit concerns with both of those. I see big families with teenagers, and I drove down the road the other day, and I was like, oh, wow, your kids are all driving now. I can tell because there's 26 cars in your driveway. But, and I don't want to have an ordinance that we can't enforce per se, because it's like, well, what are you going to do with this family? You're going to have them park on the street? And then you say you can't park on the street, so then where are they going to park? So, anyway.
There's an old legal adage that said hard cases make bad law, meaning that a general law that applies to the more average conditions of things is a much better law than trying to incorporate every possible extreme case.
Yeah.
Right? We can't make a law that does all that. And I think that there has to be some type of a compromise between saying, okay, you have a residential home with 26 cars, you shouldn't have a reasonable expectation of being able to park all of those cars at your property.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be the responsibility of the city or your neighbors or anybody else to accept the overflow of the fact that you have an unreasonable accommodation where you are, right? You know, it's one of the things that is frustrating about some of these HOAs with the smaller areas and the really restrictive driveways and stuff like that is you didn't have to live there. That's not your, you know, you didn't have to choose that property, and you have to understand that when you get there, there's certain restrictions and limitations on it, right? And so I guess my recommendation would be that we adopt this kind of a generalized thing, and if there are exceptions that come up or there's isolated cases that may need a different interpretation of something, I think we could take a look at those.
Well, these come from Jenny. I will say these come from a lot of these, I'm assuming, come through Jenny, who has worked in a has worked in a hard area for code enforcement she turned a certain other city around as far as code enforcement. She's seeing how these things affect. I mean, it could just be aesthetically, but those sometimes aesthetics do affect. Yep.
And for me, I think these ordinances, and this even bleeds over into the next thing we're going to talk about in the work meeting, there's this sentiment that keeps coming, well, I don't want to be breaking the law. Well, these ordinances, to me, are in place to help enforcement and help settle disputes when there's a problem, right? Nobody's coming to my house and peeking through, so mine is the second one there. I've got a gate there and trailers behind it. Guess what? It's dirt, and I have to take care of the weeds and everything. Nobody's peeking over my fence to say, oh my gosh, you don't have an approved, surface underneath those trailers. We're gonna get you for it. But if it becomes a problem, if I don't keep that up and there's weeds everywhere and it's a nuisance and my neighbors complain and I don't do anything, there's a recourse to solve the problem, right? So To me, and that's, to me, why it's okay to move these things along, and if we come to a situation that we realize that the wording should be different, because, as Steve said, the majority of people will get caught in this, and we're not intending them to, then we can adjust it.
Yep, that's right.
All right, back to Omaha.
Okay. The next one, our off-street parking section, it really was written kind of thinking about commercial uses, but it's the same section we use for residential. And so they're proposing an amendment just in paragraph or chapter 1024-10, where it says parking lot design and construction, but it really is applicable to residential or commercial. So we're just removing that word lot. So parking design and construction, and that's where we have the paving, the grading, keeping a parking area that's free from dust. And those standards are already there. We're just being more clear that this is not just standards for commercial, but also for residential or for other uses in the city. The next one is on also on parking for restaurants. We've been getting feedback from some of our development partners that our restaurant parking ratio is higher than what is typically in the marketplace around us. So we did a study. We looked at all the different cities around us. We also did some research just using some parking impact standards that are published by a national engineering company. And this is the recommendation that we're making. Is it said currently 3 spaces per 100 square feet of floor area. Oftentimes cities will say, but that's not gross, that is a net, and in restaurants it's usually based on where's kind of like the public areas. You can subtract your freezer, you can subtract the kitchen potentially. So in this case, we're proposing to amend it to 2 spaces per 100 square feet of floor area accessible to the public. And that seems to be in line with kind of the industry standards.
I can see that making sense for maybe a smaller restaurant that's got, 8 or 10 tables or something like that. But, not to call anybody out, but, you have a bigger facility here, and there's people parking on dirt patches and streets and everywhere else trying to find a place to park, and it's substantially under-supplied for the demand of the place. And so I don't know how we resolve that, but that's a concern, because the overflow parking just impacts every other retail business around there.
Right. I can tell you that our current ordinance, if we did not apply some type of net, for example, on Toscanos, they would not even have a chance to park it. Now, that's per the code. We have a pretty progressive ordinance in that we do allow a development partner to propose an alternative parking study and basically prove to the Planning Commission that they could have a parking reduction or shared parking. So we have that already in the ordinance, and in fact, that's how Toscanos is going to be on next week's Planning Commission agenda, is using that parking study, which is, again, an option within the code. We could just continue to rely on that, but I can tell you it frustrates our development partners who are looking to place restaurants in the city. One thing that I had thought about, though, thinking about some of our other experiences in our city, we could potentially expand this to make sure we're capturing outdoor dining areas. It says accessible to the public, but we could clarify that. That was the issue that we ran into with Redemption, because where they expanded during COVID, they essentially expanded their seating area without accounting for additional parking. Another challenge we had there is that they were able to classify under like a tavern or a bar, which has a different parking standard than a restaurant, but they have functioned very similar to a restaurant and have a little higher parking impact. And so that was some of the reasons why that site, their parking did not match up as well with their actual use in that location.
Well, and I would say, Michael, there's another restaurant that shall remain nameless, big, pretty blue building next to Toscanos. But, for example, weekends they're overparked. They're on dirt, but they're also, looking back, there were some cross-parking agreements on other development that hasn't come in yet, right? So there's
Yeah.
future parking gonna come in and apply there, but it's not there yet. So right now, they appear overparked, but they won't be once all the, eventually, future parking comes.
And you have, as you know, the council has the opportunity to change any of these. For example, maybe you could do 3 spaces per 100 square feet, but still do the kind of the net. You could do the accessible to the public.
I'm okay with the net calculation. I
Yeah.
mean, that's all just semantics, right?
Right.
What I'm concerned about is that there's adequate parking for peak time use. And I know you don't build the church just for Easter Sunday, but there's got to be some kind of an accommodation for these high demand times when there's so much parking. I mean, I'm just thinking of really popular restaurants around. I mean, you go out to Texas Roadhouse over there in South Jordan. There's not a place to park, man. The whole parking lot's full.
Well, if it weren't for the businesses that are closed at night.
Because they have cross.
Then can you expand into there, but that's a problem, for
Right.
sure.
The Chili's across over there in Riverton, right, on 100, Garage Grill, for example, right? I mean, any place that there's a large popular sit-down restaurant kind of situation, I think that just the demand for that kind of a facility seems different than a facility that's inside of a strip mall or something like that. Does that make sense? So I don't necessarily know if I have a good suggestion for that or a recommendation, but I would love to hear one.
I think it's tough. And I know we could talk about parking spaces all night long. There seems to never be enough parking because we love our vehicles. And I know I drive, when we got to eat, there's 2 vehicles, my vehicle and the wife's vehicle, right? And we take up 2 spots 90% of the time, unless we're dating. But you don't build the church for Easter Sunday. They don't build the schools for capacity. They have portables. So there's got to be some workaround. I don't think that, I mean, what cities did the study come from? Like South Jordan, other disconnected cities?
Bluffdale, South Jordan, West Jordan, Draper, Riverton.
Because cities with trans or public trans or means would be more applicable to a smaller parking site. What's the net cost of, on this particular site that's coming next week, what's the difference in parking structure? Like how many spaces are we talking about?
If I recall, it was 150 is what our code would require, and I think they were, under their parking study, they were trying to get down to 93.
Wow.
And then the Garage Grill, their parking required was 99, and I think they provided 119. And so they're going to do cross-parking to do overflow when needed.
See, but he's also judging by, you ever been to Toscano's over there? And
Yeah, his
Draper,
parking
there's
space
no
isn't,
way.
is
There's-
not, he doesn't need that many over there.
Yeah.
So that's where I can see there's this,
Yeah.
because also I think you have to think of the other way, not to, I don't want to belabor this, but
I wanna be a good
sometimes
partner,
you could, if we overpark, say, there's a couple of developments along Bangor Highway that are overparked, that are just wasted commercial space. You know, I don't think we want to waste commercial spaces at a premium.
You know, again, to our credit, this is the first city I've worked for that had an option to allow for these alternative parking studies and to at least consider it.
Does that
So
option go
our
both ways?
restaurant standard is we're starting out high. There's an opportunity to reduce it. I'm just sharing with you that it's been frustrating when we're working with our development partners and they see our standard and then they know they've got to do this study and come to the planning commission and ask them to approve it. They would just like more predictability. And,
There's a counter argument, there's an economic benefit for having adequate parking, right? Just like, you know, you're only sitting half your tables, you're missing half your revenue, right? If you don't have enough place to park the customers that are demanding your services, you're losing out on potential customers that could be generating revenue and sales tax. And so
You drive by a parking lot's full, you're driving by.
Yeah, you just drive up to the next place, right? So that's,
But
I
then,
guess what I'm saying is
but
that
you can
there's-
also have,
Easter Sunday.
you can also have the problem of Vasa, right? Where they're taking up everyone else's parking and
Exactly,
impeding.
because we didn't accommodate enough parking for the demand that was gonna be there. And that's the, I guess I'm just expressing that concern that inadequate parking is a detriment to the neighbors and potentially to the business there. And I'm not suggesting that we need to have, a bajillion parking spots for every place, but there's got to be some kind of a consideration. I mean, you could look at, maybe you could, before we even specifically vote on that, this particular issue or change it, but show me a few restaurants and, big popular restaurants, how many parking spots they have and what kind of square footage they might have. I mean, I don't know how accurate we can get, but we can approximate some things. Because I just think that's going to give you an idea whether or not this number actually makes sense or not.
So the applicant has the opportunity to bring a petition forward and a study forward. If we, to reduce it, if we have evidence or a study or traffic patterns or traffic flow to increase it
There's a much bigger problem functionally when there's not enough, if we have a way for them to reduce it. I totally understand what you're saying and completely agree 100%. I don't want businesses to say we're not interested because that's what your code says, right? And it's too cumbersome to go through that process to reduce it. Completely agree. At what point do we, but when it's not sufficient, it's a huge problem and there's no fix for it, right? It's too late. Is there anything we can do, or is it the situation you described earlier where we're trying to do things to fit the most situations we can? There's always going to be an outlet.
Yeah,
I mean, how do you know which one's
How many Vosses do we have?
Which one's going to be that popular?
Yeah, it's hard too, because it's like you were saying, Easter Sunday. If you have your parking set so that on your max volume, you're maybe overflowing, but on 95% of the time, you can't fill it up. So it's hard, because you might lose out on a tiny bit of revenue this day, but you spend a lot of extra money on empty parking
I
lot.
completely understand.
So, yeah, it's a hard balance, huh?
There's no reason for them to spend money on a lot of parking spaces that are going to be empty most of the time, right? I totally agree. And then if they have a peak activity, that's just kind of a consequence that happens. But I'm just not convinced that either 2 or 3 is the right number.
2.5.
Without any comparison.
3 again is what's in the code now. That's already existing. We were reducing it to 2 based on our studies. So you can leave it alone.
Michael, how much work would it be to get a
Yeah.
few examples if we just left this out for now and just had it come back in 8 weeks with a few examples for us?
So most of the developments that do come in with the 3 do a study. And I think with 2, they'll do a study as well still, and they'll land at 1.8, 1.9, 1.7. And there's different ways. A lot of them, like restaurants, for example, they can go off gross square footage of their building. They can go off tables. They can go off, I don't know, all sorts of crazy things in the parking manual that they all use to do their studies. And some of them use data from existing restaurants, which works pretty well. And we often do look at if they're next to a TRAX line or if they're next to some type of transit. So I think no matter what gets adopted, most of the time, they're going to do a study to alter it.
So are you saying we're not really losing anything by being at 3? You don't think there's anybody walking away from the city being at 3?
I think with 3, right off the bat, some of them go, oh, we're looking at these other cities that have these standards that are lower, and we're losing some tenants going to other places because they don't want to do the fight. And if we're closer to them, then we'll attract the businesses to come here in the first place, and then they can do their study.
Right. I have to assure our partners that it's okay, our commission's really good, you present credible evidence, they'll listen to you. But it still is some risk, right? They still are uncomfortable. They're designing their whole site based on what they think is appropriate, and they have to, it's just not predictable.
Have we
right?
approved any restaurant or subdivision or area with this current standard? Has anybody just taken the standard and said, okay, go? The 3
The 3.
3 per 100
Is
square
anybody at 3 right now in the city?
We have very few sit-down restaurants, as you know, and so this 3.
Thanks for the reminder, Michael.
Yeah.
Rub it in.
And we have to do it on gross, right? That's the way it is currently written. We don't have that net option even.
Most of our developments are in these centers, restaurants
Right.
especially, and that's why the study works.
Because they do shared parking
They
and
start
everything on
talking about shared parking, and this number doesn't say anything about that. So the studies usually come out of that. So
Yeah.
Well,
I think the lower number just brings us more in line with our neighbors so that we're similar to them as we
Well,
start.
and tell me, somebody like Slackwater is going to come, say Slackwater's coming, right? They're going to want to park adequately, right? If they feel like they need 2.5, for example, for their business model, I think they're going to come in at 2.5. I mean, they're not going to, I think a business is not going to underpark if they, tell me if I'm wrong.
Depends on what's next to them.
Yeah.
But if it affects their
There's a
business,
street
though.
next to them, they're like, screw it, let them park.
One example was JCW's. When they built way under, and they ended up constructing the site next to them.
They
To
did.
get more parking. And a lot of them will answer like that, because I think the businesses want to be successful too, and so when they come in, they know.
Kind of the two question or comment I had is based on what you just said is one, if it's a competitive thing, anecdotally saying we may be losing some is one thing versus data, right? But I think what's easier to point to is this is a case of what are competitor cities doing, right? What is standard? If we're far above that, then it makes sense to adjust that to be closer to them as a starting point.
That's where I'm
If I might, Mayor, if you went across this country and looked, cities are going to calculate these all sorts of ways. Gross square foot of the restaurant, the way we were talking about the public dining area. Some look at the number, I've worked in a city where it was the number of seats in that dining area. It was a certain number of parking spaces per the number of seats. Sometimes it's the seats, some combination of all that. 3 is probably high in my experience, 3 per 100 on that. 2 is probably more in line, so I see where staff got that. Whatever it is, 3 is probably high. The way we have it parked now, you'd be parking for that Easter Sunday. Okay. And that's, if we're hearing that from the developers, they're hearing it from the person who has to build it. Because if I build that parking lot, I've also got to maintain it. My restaurant now has to cover that. And frankly, talking with business owners and restaurant owners specifically, if your restaurant's always packed and people have a hard time finding a parking space, it doesn't drive the people, I'm never going there. It increases some of that demand. Well, you better get there early because, yeah, it's good. Yeah. So there is this, it's if you've ever given a speech to a group and there are 50 people. If you're in a room that seats 30 and it's standing room only, it comes across differently than if you're in a ballroom for 500 and you're speaking to 50. I think sometimes our restaurants, they're also trying to figure out, how do I maximize my image? I think this study is very unique and it gives them that flexibility, but you don't have to do it today. I do think 3 is high. I think in my experience, 3 per 100 is high.
With that, I'm really okay with the 2, with what we just talked about. And just
Nathan, why didn't you say something sooner?
As a kind of a party comment, I would much rather see a popular restaurant be overparked than all of our townhouses and things, and not nearly as concerned.
Okay, sorry, Michael. Okay, let's go. Sorry.
All right. The next one is just dealing with signage. Oh, let me back up. Okay, must not have a sign. So we amended our electronic signs about a year ago, but we wanted to just clarify the language about that a street right-of-way helps to define where we can place these electronic signs. What are those appropriate buffers and borders? So this was just making the language more clear to the intent of what we had already previously approved on electronic signs. And then, as we've talked before, the state wants us to track ADUs, and not just how many we build, but how many are still in use. And one of the best ways to do that is to require a license. I think we've mentioned this in a work meeting. So there's a text amendment to just simply require business licensing for operating an accessory dwelling unit. And that's a very minimal business license fee. I think it's like $65 a year or something like that.
That was my question.
It's just the base fee that we would collect on that.
And then is there like some sort of a regulation on there, like if you have problems? I guess it's just all part of the.
Yeah, it's already in the ordinance, right? This is just saying we're going to require, and this is one of the options that the state code had anticipated and was encouraging cities to consider adopting. Not a requirement, but it was an option. And then the last one, I believe, was dealing with, there was some inconsistency in that, the result of the big amendment that we did in the Auto Mall district, where we allowed for a reduction of landscaping behind the property line for auto displays. One section, and I included it, that's section O, you can see letter 2, display pedestals shall be no closer than 2 feet from a property line. But then in 1031-10C, we said that they could reduce that 15-foot landscape buffer down to 8 feet. So there was a disconnect. We would allow 2 feet in one place, but then we required 8 feet of landscaping in another. And Blake and I went back and looked at the minutes and the records of everything. We believe that the 2 feet is what the council wanted, so we adjusted it to the 2 feet. Saying a pedestal, but it doesn't necessarily have to be sitting on something, but you do see these occasionally where they want to bring that vehicle right out closer to the streetscape. And it's very limited. It's only for 20 feet in length where they can bring that vehicle out. So that was just a cleanup correction. So again, you can make any adjustments to any of these that are in your packet. You can choose to eliminate some or whatever you would like to do. Planning Commission had given a recommendation of approval. It was a 6-0 vote. We are still working on some lighting amendments dealing with glare. And then as I mentioned to you already, recreational vehicle, there's another amendment that's coming to you on that.
Okay, I'll go. Motion to approve ordinance number 2023-14, amending Title 10 of the Harriman City Code to clarify existing zoning definitions and standards for administrative interpretations, weeds, lot widths, walls, fencing, off-road parking, commercial signage, accessory dwelling unit license requirements, and minimum landscape width in the Autos Mall Special District.
Second. Motion by Sherry, second by Jared. Steve?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Teddy?
Yes.
Jared?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. That motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate your work and that of the Planning Commission and Code Enforcement and everybody on that. Yeah. Future meetings, next Planning Commission meeting, July 19th. Next City Council meeting, August 9th. That sounds good. Events, the Hungry Harriman Farmers Market every Monday for the upcoming. And I would also say, please go see Freaky Friday at Butterfield Pavilion, Rosecrest Pavilion at Butterfield Park. Running through Saturday and then a break and then final on Monday. So kind of been low, hasn't been well attended, so please get out. I've heard it's hilarious, all the reviews. They've had reviews, they've had people come out and the reviews are outstanding. I feel bad I haven't been, but I'm going Friday, so get out and see that. Any other events? The foam. Yeti in the Park, next Wednesday at 6 o'clock, a foam run.
At Crane Park.
At Crane Park out front here. So, okay. Look for a motion to adjourn. Go back into close, yeah, back into work, yes.
So moved.
Motion by Sherry,
Second.
second by Teddy, all in favor?
Aye. Yeah, it's really cool. It is a